Your damaged baggage. Don't waste my time. Those 5 words destroyed Victoria Hayes on Christmas Eve, sent by a man who rejected her before even showing up. At 34, the pediatric nurse sat alone in Manhattan's most romantic restaurant, humiliation burning through her chest while couples celebrated around her. She'd convinced herself to try dating again after her divorce. One last chance at happiness. But that text confirmed her worst fear. She was unlovable, broken, too scarred for anyone to want. Then a little girl appeared beside her table holding a teddy bear. "You look sad. Are you all alone too?" Victoria had no idea that this child and her billionaire father were about to change everything. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The snow had started falling around 6 o'clock, turning Fifth Avenue into something out of a movie nobody asked to be in. Victoria Hayes pressed her forehead against the cold window of Cielo, watching fat flakes drift past the glass while her phone screen glowed with that message. She'd read it 4 times now. Each time hurt worse. "Listen, I saw your profile again and noticed you're divorced. I don't do damaged baggage. Find someone else to waste your time with. Merry Christmas." Damaged baggage. She set the phone face down on the white tablecloth, her hands shaking. Around her, the restaurant hummed with life. Couples leaning close over candlelight, families laughing, a man on one knee proposing near the bar while everyone applauded. The whole damn room celebrated love, while Victoria sat alone at a table set for 2, wearing the navy dress she'd bought specifically for tonight because the salesgirl said it made her look confident. Confident. Right. The waiter appeared again, younger than her, probably 25, with that particular brand of pity reserved for women dining alone on Christmas Eve. "Miss, can I get you anything while you wait?" "I'm not waiting anymore." Victoria's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Just the check, please." "You didn't order anything." "I know. Just charge me for taking up the table." He hesitated. "Ma'am, we don't charge people for—" "Please?" She looked up at him. "I just want to leave." Something in her expression made him nod and disappear. Victoria reached for her wine, the single glass of Pinot Noir she'd ordered to calm her nerves, and downed half of it. Her best friend Melissa had set up this blind date with some hedge fund manager named Brad, or Brett, or something equally forgettable. "He's perfect for you," Melissa had insisted. "Successful, handsome, recently single. You need to get back out there, Vic. Back out there. As if dating were a swimming pool you could just jump into instead of an ocean designed to drown you." Her phone buzzed. She flipped it over, hoping irrationally that Brad or Brett had sent an apology, that this was all some cruel joke. Instead, Melissa's name flashed across the screen. "How's it going? Is he hot?" Victoria typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, "He didn't show. Going home." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "What? I'm calling you right now." "No," Victoria whispered to her phone, declining the call. She couldn't handle Melissa's well-meaning outrage right now. Couldn't handle being told this wasn't her fault, that Brad or Brett was an asshole, that there were plenty of fish in the sea. The ocean metaphor again. She was so tired of drowning. The waiter returned with a black leather folder. "No charge," he said quietly. "Merry Christmas." Victoria's throat tightened. "Thank you." She was reaching for her coat when the little girl appeared. 1 second, Victoria was alone, and the next there was a child standing beside her table, maybe 5 years old, wearing a red velvet dress with white tights and holding a worn teddy bear with one eye missing. The girl had dark curls pulled into a ponytail and the kind of serious brown eyes that looked too old for her face. "You look sad," the girl said, matter of fact. "Are you all alone too?" Victoria blinked. Yes, I am." "That's not good. Nobody should be alone on Christmas." The girl held up her teddy bear. "This is Mr. Buttons. He used to be sad and alone, but then I found him, and now he's happy. Do you want to hold him? He makes people feel better." Something cracked open in Victoria's chest. She looked around the restaurant, searching for whoever this child belonged to, but saw only strangers. "Sweetie, where's your, Sophie?" The voice came from behind her, deep and quiet. "What did I tell you about wandering off?" Victoria turned and immediately forgot how to breathe. The man standing there looked like he'd walked out of a cologne advertisement. Tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair pushed back from his face and gray eyes that held exhaustion around the edges despite his expensive suit. He was maybe 32, 33, handsome in that effortless way that certain men were. But it was the way he looked at the little girl that made Victoria's heart squeeze. Pure, unfiltered love mixed with bone-deep weariness. "I'm so sorry," he said, meeting Victoria's eyes. "My daughter has a habit of collecting strays. Sophie, come back to our table." "But Dad, she's sad." Sophie didn't move. "Look at her face." "Sophie, and she's all alone on Christmas. That's really sad. Probably the saddest thing." The girl turned back to Victoria. "Are you crying?" Victoria hadn't realized tears were sliding down her cheeks until Sophie pointed it out. She wiped them away quickly, mortified. "I'm fine, sweetheart. You should go back to your father." But Sophie was already climbing into the empty chair across from Victoria, setting Mr. Buttons on the table between them like a peace offering. "I'm Sophie Reed. I'm 5 3/4. What's your name?" "Sophie?" The man, Reed apparently, ran a hand through his hair. "You can't just, Victoria," she heard herself say. "I'm Victoria Hayes." Sophie beamed. "That's a princess name. Are you a princess?" Despite everything, Victoria almost smiled. "No, I'm a nurse." "Oh, so you help people who are sick. That's even better than being a princess." Sophie leaned forward conspiratorially. "My dad builds buildings, really tall ones, but he says helping people is more important than making money." "Sophie," Reed's voice carried a warning now, but he was looking at Victoria with something like apology in his eyes. "I'm sorry. She's normally not this enthusiastic with strangers." "I like her," Sophie announced. "She has a kind face, and she needs Mr. Buttons." Victoria looked at this one-eyed teddy bear, then at this impossibly earnest child, then at the man who was clearly trying to parent while also dying of embarrassment. The absurdity of the situation hit her all at once. Here she was, humiliated and heartbroken, being adopted by a 5-year-old with a stuffed animal. "It's okay," she said softly. "Really." Reed studied her for a moment, and Victoria saw the exact second he noticed the table set for two, the single wine glass, her coat already in her hands. His expression shifted into something she couldn't quite read. "You were supposed to meet someone," he said. It wasn't a question. Victoria's face burned. It didn't work out. Their loss. He said it simply, like it was fact rather than comfort. Then, before she could process that, "My daughter is right. Nobody should be alone on Christmas. Would you like to join us for dinner?" Victoria stared at him. "What?" "We have a table for 6. My mother was supposed to come, but her flight got canceled because of the snow. My business partners bailed to be with their families, so it's just Sophie and me, and apparently Mr. Buttons." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "We could use the company." "You don't even know me. You're a nurse named Victoria who makes my daughter smile. That's enough." He glanced at Sophie, who was nodding enthusiastically. "Unless you'd rather spend Christmas Eve alone, which I completely understand." Victoria should say no. Should politely decline and go home to her studio apartment in Brooklyn, microwave some leftovers, and watch whatever romantic comedy Netflix recommended until she fell asleep on the couch. That was safe. Predictable. But Sophie was looking at her with those 2 old eyes, holding Mr. Buttons like a talisman, and Reed was watching her with something that might have been loneliness matching her own. "Okay," Victoria whispered. Sophie squealed and grabbed her hand. "Come on! Our table has a view of the whole city. You can see the Empire State Building and everything." Reed picked up Victoria's coat and held it open for her, an old-fashioned gesture that made her feel unsteady. As she slipped her arms into the sleeves, he leaned close enough that she caught the scent of expensive cologne and something underneath, something warm. "Thank you," he said quietly. "She's been sad all month. You just made her Christmas." "I didn't do anything." "You're here. That's everything." He guided her across the restaurant with a light hand on her lower back, following Sophie, who was practically skipping toward a table by the windows. Victoria's mind spun. This couldn't be real. Men who looked like him didn't invite strange women to Christmas dinner. Little girls didn't just adopt random people in restaurants. This was some kind of fever dream brought on by humiliation and wine. Their table overlooked Manhattan in all its glittering glory. Sophie immediately claimed the seat next to Victoria, chattering about how the snow made everything look like a snow globe, while Reed settled across from them with the careful movements of someone very tired. "I'm Alexander, by the way," he said. "Alexander Reed. But everyone calls me Alex." "The architect?" The words escaped before Victoria could stop them. Something flickered in his eyes. "You know my work?" Victoria fumbled. "I read an article about the Hudson Yards development. That was yours, wasn't it?" "One of mine, yes." He didn't sound boastful, just tired. "Among other things," Sophie tugged on Victoria's sleeve, "Dad builds skyscrapers, really, really tall ones that touch the clouds. He's super important." "I build buildings," Alex corrected gently. "I'm not important." "Yes, you are. Everyone says so." "Everyone's wrong." He caught Victoria's eye across the table, and she saw something there, a weariness that went bone deep, the kind that came from carrying weight nobody else could see. "What kind of nursing do you do?" "Pediatrics at Mount Sinai," Sophie gasped. "You take care of kids? Like me?" "Kids who are sick, yes. That's the best job ever." Sophie hugged Mr. Buttons. "When I'm grown up, I want to help people too. Maybe I'll be a doctor, or a veterinarian, or both." "You can be anything you want," Victoria said automatically, the same thing she told her young patients. "That's what Dad says, but he's always busy, so sometimes I think he forgets I'm going to grow up." Sophie said it without accusation, just stated fact, but Victoria saw Alex flinch. "I don't forget," he said quietly. The waiter appeared, a different one, older, who greeted Alex by name and didn't seem remotely surprised by the addition to their table. They ordered, Alex insisting Victoria get whatever she wanted, Sophie requesting chicken fingers with the kind of determination that suggested this was a battle she'd won before. As the waiter left, Sophie launched into a story about her school's Christmas pageant, something involving a sheep costume and a boy named Marcus who'd eaten paste. Alex listened with the focused attention of someone who knew these stories mattered, even as Victoria watched him rub his temples like he had a headache building. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly, while Sophie paused for breath. "Long week." He dropped his hand. "Month, actually. Year." "Dad works too much," Sophie informed Victoria. "Nana says he's going to work himself into an early grave, which sounds scary, but I don't really know what it means." "It means your Nana worries too much," Alex said. "She says you never sleep." "I sleep." "Not very much." Sophie turned to Victoria. "He has nightmares sometimes. I hear him." "Sophie." Alex's voice held a warning, but his daughter kept going. "He gets sad late at night when he thinks I'm asleep. I hear him walking around." Sophie's expression turned serious. "I think he misses Mom." The table fell silent. Victoria watched Alex's face close off, watched him reach for his water glass with hands that shook slightly. Sophie seemed oblivious to the bomb she'd just dropped, humming to herself while rearranging her silverware into patterns. "I'm sorry," Victoria said softly. Alex shook his head. "Don't be." "How long has it been?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, 2 years, almost exactly. 2 years. Sophie would have been 3, barely old enough to remember. Victoria's chest ached for both of them. This exhausted man trying to hold everything together. This little girl who talked about her mother like a fact rather than a loss because that was all she knew how to do. "She died right before Christmas," Sophie said suddenly. "That's why Christmas is sad now, even though we try to make it happy." "Sophie, we don't need to be. It's okay to be sad, Dad. You told me that." Sophie looked at Victoria. "Do you get sad on Christmas?" Victoria's throat closed. She thought about her ex-husband telling her he couldn't stay married to someone who couldn't give him children. Thought about the divorce papers she'd signed alone in a lawyer's office while sleet hammered the windows. Thought about every Christmas since, spent with Melissa's family while she smiled and pretended she wasn't breaking inside. "Yes," she whispered. "Sometimes I do." Sophie reached over and patted her hand. "That's okay. Being sad is part of being human. That's what my therapist says." Alex closed his eyes briefly. "I'm sorry, she doesn't have a filter." "I like it," Victoria said, and meant it. Most people pretend everything's fine when it's not. Exactly, Sophie beamed. Pretending is silly. If you're sad, you should just say you're sad. The food arrived then, saving them from wherever that conversation was heading. Sophie attacked her chicken fingers with enthusiasm, while Alex pushed his salmon around his plate, eating mechanically like it was fuel rather than enjoyment. You don't like it? Victoria asked. What? No, it's fine. I'm just not very hungry. Dad never eats enough, Sophie said through a mouthful of chicken. He forgets about lunch sometimes. I have to remind him. I eat plenty. Nana says you're getting too skinny. Your Nana has opinions about everything, Sophie grinned. That's what makes her fun. Victoria found herself smiling despite everything. There was something surreal about this, sitting in one of Manhattan's most expensive restaurants with a billionaire architect and his precocious daughter, talking about dead wives and absent nanas, like they were old friends instead of strangers who'd met 20 minutes ago. What were you supposed to do tonight? Alex asked suddenly. Before your plans fell through, Victoria pushed pasta around her plate. Meet someone. A blind date Melissa set up. Her husband's business partner or something. And he stood you up? Worse. He canceled by text. She didn't know why she was telling him this. Said I was damaged baggage because I'm divorced. Alex's jaw tightened. What an asshole. Dad, Sophie looked scandalized. That's a bad word. You're right. I apologize. He didn't look away from Victoria. But he is? Maybe he's right, though. The wine had loosened her tongue. Maybe I am damaged. Stop. Alex's voice was firm. Don't let some coward who can't even reject someone to their face make you believe you're anything less than... He stopped, seemed to realize he was getting worked up. I'm sorry, that's none of my business. It's kind of nice, Victoria admitted, having someone be angry on my behalf. Are you divorced? Sophie asked, with the bluntness of a child who didn't understand social niceties. Sophie, that's rude. It's okay. Victoria set down her fork. Yes, I am. My husband and I split up 3 years ago. Why? Sophie, it's okay, Victoria said again. She looked at this little girl who'd decided they were friends for no reason except instinct. We wanted different things. He wanted a big family. I couldn't give him that. She didn't explain about the infertility, the endless doctor appointments, the way her body had betrayed her month after month until her ex-husband's disappointment had curdled into resentment. Sophie was too young for that story, but Alex understood. She saw it in his eyes, that flash of recognition that came from knowing what loss felt like. That's sad, Sophie said simply. I'm sorry. Me too. But you're really pretty and nice, so I bet lots of people want to marry you. Victoria's laugh came out wet. I don't think it works that way, sweetie. Why not? Dad's really handsome and nice, and lots of people want to marry him too. But he says no because he's still sad about Mom. Sophie, Alex's face had gone red. We're not talking about this. Why? It's true. Mrs. Patterson from your office sent you flowers last week, and that lady at the gym keeps asking you to coffee. And enough. Alex's voice was gentle but final. Eat your dinner. Sophie subsided into humming, apparently satisfied she'd made her point. Victoria caught Alex's eye across the table and saw his mortification, but also something else. Something vulnerable. Sorry, he mouthed. Victoria shook her head. It's okay, she mouthed back. They ate in relative silence for a while. Sophie providing running commentary about the snow and the city lights and how Mr. Buttons had never been to such a fancy restaurant before. Victoria let the conversation wash over her, feeling something unknot in her chest for the first time all evening. This was weird, deeply, profoundly weird, but it was also nice. Can I ask you something? Alex said as they waited for dessert. Sophie had gone to the bathroom with Mr. Buttons, leaving them alone. Sure. Why did you say yes to joining us? He leaned forward slightly. You don't know us. I could be anyone. This whole thing could be crazy, Victoria supplied. I was going to say inappropriate, but yes. She considered this. Why had she said yes? Because Sophie's eyes reminded her of the kids she treated? Because Alex looked like he was drowning, and she recognized the expression? Because spending Christmas alone suddenly felt worse than spending it with strangers? Your daughter asked me to, she said finally, and I don't think I've ever been able to say no to a kid. Occupational hazard? Something like that. She studied him. Why did you invite me? Alex was quiet for a moment. Honestly? Because Sophie was right. You looked sad, and I know what that feels like. He turned his wine glass in slow circles. 2 years, and I still don't know how to do this. Christmas, family dinners, any of it without. He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. My therapist says grief doesn't have a timeline, Victoria offered. That it's not something you get over, just something you learn to carry. You sound like you're speaking from experience. Different kind of loss, but yeah. She traced the rim of her glass. I grieved my marriage for a long time. The life I thought I was going to have, the kids I thought I'd raise. She laughed, but it sounded broken. God, I'm sorry. You don't need to hear this. Maybe I do. Alex met her eyes. Everyone around me treats grief like a problem to solve. They keep telling me it's been long enough, that I should move on, that Sophie needs a mother. Like I can just replace what I lost. You can't replace people. No, you can't. He exhaled slowly. But you can be alone in a crowded room, apparently. That's a special kind of hell. Victoria knew exactly what he meant. She'd spent 3 years at Melissa's dinner parties, surrounded by couples and their children, smiling until her face hurt, while loneliness ate her alive from the inside. Yeah, she whispered. It really is. Sophie returned then, declaring she wanted chocolate cake and ice cream, and could she please have both. Alex agreed with the weary resignation of a father who'd lost that battle long ago, and the conversation shifted back to safe territory, favorite desserts, Sophie's upcoming school play, whether Mr. Buttons preferred vanilla or strawberry ice cream. Vanilla, apparently because he was a traditionalist. But something had shifted between Victoria and Alex. Some understanding that came from recognizing your own damage in someone else's eyes. They were both broken in different ways, both trying to figure out how to keep breathing. The restaurant began to empty as they lingered over dessert. Sophie had chocolate on her nose and was explaining in great detail why her teacher was wrong about penguins being able to fly. They're birds, Dad. All birds fly. That's like their whole thing. Penguins are the exception, Alex said patiently. Exceptions are stupid. They're also necessary. That doesn't make sense. Welcome to life, sweetheart. Victoria watched them bicker with the ease of people who'd had this conversation before and felt something warm unfurl in her chest. This was what she'd wanted. Not the billionaire lifestyle or the fancy restaurant, just this simple intimacy of family, of being included in someone's orbit. Her phone buzzed. Melissa again. V, I'm so sorry. Brad's an asshole. Come to our place? We've got leftovers and wine, and I'll let you punch his picture I found on LinkedIn. Victoria typed back, I'm actually okay. Turns out, Christmas isn't a total disaster after all. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. What does that mean? Victoria smiled and pocketed her phone without responding. Everything okay? Alex asked. Yeah, just my friend checking on me. Good friend. The best. Victoria hesitated. She's the one who set up the blind date, actually. She's going to feel terrible when I tell her what happened. You don't have to tell her. She'll know something's up. I'm a terrible liar. Then tell her the truth. Alex's smile was small but genuine. That you got stood up and then adopted by a 5-year-old with a teddy bear. She'll think I'm making it up. Probably. He glanced at Sophie, who was now making Mr. Buttons dance across the table. I still can't believe she did that. Just walked up to you like you were old friends. Kids don't have the same walls adults do, Victoria said. They just see people, without all the filters and fear. I wish I could see the world like that again. Me too. They were quiet for a moment, watching Sophie orchestrate an elaborate story involving Mr. Buttons, a chocolate cake mountain, and a brave princess. Victoria felt herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months, years maybe. There was something about this odd little family that made her feel less alone. Finally, Alex signaled for the check. The waiter brought it in that discreet leather folder that expensive restaurants used, and Victoria caught a glimpse of the total before Alex closed it quickly. She didn't know what a Christmas Eve dinner at Cielo cost, but she'd bet it was more than her monthly rent. Thank you for tonight, Alex said as they gathered their things. I mean that. You gave Sophie the first real smile I've seen from her all month. She gave me one too. Victoria pulled on her coat. I was about to go home and feel sorry for myself. This was better. Much better, Sophie agreed, slipping her hand into Victoria's like it was the most natural thing in the world. You should come home with us. Sophie, what? She's nice and she's alone and it's Christmas. We have that big apartment with all those empty rooms. She could stay in one. Or she could sleep in my room. I have bunk beds. Alex looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. Sophie, you can't just invite people to stay over. Why not? Because that's not how the world works. It should be how the world works. Sophie looked up at Victoria. Do you have somewhere to go? Victoria thought about her studio apartment with its second-hand furniture and the Christmas tree she hadn't bothered to put up. I have a home, sweetie. But is it a good home? With people who love you? The question landed like a punch. Victoria's throat closed. Sophie, that's enough, Alex said gently. Victoria has her own life. We can't just... I know. Sophie's voice went small. I just thought maybe she doesn't want to be alone either. Victoria crouched down to Sophie's eye level, her knees protesting against the tight dress. Listen to me. Tonight was wonderful. Meeting you was the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. But you don't need to fix me, okay? I'm going to be fine. But you're still sad. A little bit. But that's okay. Victoria touched Sophie's cheek. Sometimes being sad is just part of life. It doesn't mean you're broken. Sophie considered this with the gravity of a much older soul. Then she threw her arms around Victoria's neck, nearly knocking her over. I'm glad you weren't on a date with that mean man, Sophie whispered, because then I wouldn't have met you. Victoria hugged her back, breathing in the scent of child, chocolate and shampoo and something indefinably sweet. When she pulled away, her eyes were wet again. Me too, she managed. They made their way downstairs, Sophie between them holding both their hands. Outside, the snow had intensified, covering Manhattan in white that looked almost clean in the streetlight glow. Cars crawled past, their headlights diffused into soft halos. Do you need a car? Alex asked. I have a driver waiting. I'll grab a cab. Victoria looked up and down Fifth Avenue, where approximately 0 cabs were visible through the snow. Good luck with that. Alex pulled out his phone. It's Christmas Eve in a snowstorm. You'll be waiting an hour. I'll manage. Victoria. He said her name like he was trying to make a point. Let me give you a ride. It's the least I can do after Sophie ambushed you. I didn't ambush her, Sophie protested. I rescued her. Alex's mouth twitched. Right, that. Victoria knew she should refuse, should maintain whatever boundaries still existed between them. But the snow was coming down harder, and the wine had left her pleasantly fuzzy, and the thought of standing on a frozen street corner waiting for a cab made her want to cry. Okay, she heard herself say. Thank you. The car was exactly what she expected. A sleek black SUV with leather seats and a driver who greeted Alex by name. Sophie climbed in first, immediately claiming the window seat and pressing her face to the glass. Look, everything's turning white. It's like Narnia. You've been reading too much, Alex said, but he was smiling. Victoria gave the driver her address in Brooklyn, earning a raised eyebrow from Alex. That's not close. I know, you really don't have to. We're already going. It's fine. He settled into the seat beside her while Sophie knelt backward to watch the city disappear behind them. How long have you lived there? Since the divorce. It was all I could afford on a nurse's salary. She didn't mention that her ex had kept their apartment in the settlement, along with most of their furniture and their dog. It's small, but it's mine. That matters. Yeah. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the city giving way to Brooklyn's brownstones and quieter streets. Sophie provided running commentary about the snow, about Mr. Buttons' first car ride in months, about whether they'd have a white Christmas. We already have a white Christmas, Alex pointed out. But will it last until morning? That's the question. I don't think snow works that way. It should. Victoria found herself smiling at their easy banter, at the way Alex indulged his daughter's questions, even when he was clearly exhausted. She'd seen a lot of parents at the hospital, good ones, bad ones, everything in between, and Alex was clearly trying his best even when that best felt inadequate. Her apartment building appeared too quickly, a nondescript brick structure that looked even shabbier in the snow. The driver pulled to the curb and Victoria gathered her things, suddenly reluctant to leave this warm cocoon. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. Tonight was weird," Alex supplied. "I was going to say unexpected, but yeah, also weird." "The good kind of weird, though," Sophie piped up from the back. "Right? The very best kind." Victoria smiled at her. "Take care of your dad, okay? Make sure he eats." "I will." Sophie hesitated. "Will I see you again?" The question hung in the air. Victoria looked at Alex, who was very carefully not looking at either of them. "I don't know, sweetie." "Oh." Sophie's face fell. "Okay." Victoria's heart cracked. She opened the car door, letting in a gust of cold air and snow. "Wait." Alex's voice stopped her. Would you want to?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking uncharacteristically flustered. "I'm not good at this." "At what?" "Asking for phone numbers, dating, any of it." He met her eyes. "But Sophie's right. You shouldn't have to be alone, and neither should we. So maybe coffee sometime, or dinner, or I don't know, whatever people do when they want to see each other again." Victoria's breath caught. "You want to see me again? If that's okay. If I'm not completely misreading this." He looked vulnerable in a way that made her chest ache. "You can say no. I'll understand." She should say no. Should walk away from this impossibly complicated man and his daughter who deserved better than a broken woman who couldn't have children. Should protect herself from more heartbreak. But Sophie was watching her with hope in those two old eyes, and Alex looked like he was holding his breath, and Victoria was so tired of being alone. "Okay," she whispered. Alex's shoulders dropped with relief. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. "Coffee sounds good." They exchanged numbers there in the idling car, fingers fumbling, both of them smiling like idiots. Sophie cheered from the back seat, making Mr. Buttons dance in celebration. "I'll text you," Alex said. "Okay. Maybe this weekend? If you're not working?" "I'm not working." "Good. Great, yeah." He was still smiling. "I'm going to stop talking now before I say something stupid." Victoria laughed, surprising herself. "Good night, Alex. Good night, Sophie." "Good night, Victoria." Sophie waved enthusiastically. "Dream about happy things." Victoria stepped out into the snow, watching the SUV pull away from the curb. Through the back window, she saw Sophie still waving, saw Alex watching her in the side mirror. She stood there until the taillights disappeared around the corner, snow gathering in her hair and on her shoulders. Her phone was already buzzing with texts from Melissa, but Victoria ignored them. For the first time in 3 years, Christmas Eve didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning. Inside her apartment, Victoria kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the couch, her phone clutched in her hand. The screen lit up with a new message. Unknown number. "Thank you for saving our Christmas. Alex." She saved his number, then typed back, "Thank you for saving mine." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Alex. "Sophie wants you to know Mr. Buttons had a wonderful time." Victoria smiled. "Tell Mr. Buttons the feeling was mutual." Alex. "She also wants to know if you like hot chocolate. Apparently it's crucial information." Victoria. "I love hot chocolate." Alex. "Good. She's planning a whole menu for when she sees you again. I've been warned it involves cookies and something called friendship pancakes." Victoria. "Sounds serious." Alex. "Very serious. She's already making a list." Victoria curled up on the couch, her phone glowing in the dark apartment. Outside, snow fell silently over Brooklyn. Inside, something warm and unexpected was growing in her chest. Hope. She hadn't felt it in so long she'd almost forgotten what it was like. Victoria. "I can't wait." Alex. "Neither can we." She fell asleep like that, phone in hand, smiling at the ceiling while snow piled up on her windowsill, and somewhere across the river, a little girl and her father did the same. Alex texted her 3 days later. Victoria was in the middle of a shift dealing with a 7-year-old who'd decided to test whether pennies were edible, when her phone buzzed in her scrubs pocket. She didn't check it until her lunch break, standing in the hospital cafeteria with a sad-looking sandwich and coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. Alex. "Sophie made me promise to ask if you're free Saturday. She has plans. I'm apparently just the chauffeur." Victoria smiled at her phone like an idiot. earning a look from her co-worker Jamie, who was microwaving something that smelled like death. "Who's got you grinning like that?" Jamie asked. "Nobody. That's a somebody smile. I know the difference." Jamie pulled out her lunch, leftover curry that explained the smell, and sat across from Victoria. "Spill." "There's nothing to spill." "You're a terrible liar, Hayes, always have been." Jamie took a bite of curry, winced at the temperature, and kept talking anyway. "Is it that app Melissa made you download? Did you actually match with someone who isn't a creep?" "I deleted the app." "Then who—" Jamie's eyes widened. "Oh my God, the blind date. He actually showed up?" "No, he canceled by text." "Then I don't understand." Victoria wasn't sure she understood either. How did you explain meeting a billionaire and his daughter in a restaurant on Christmas Eve? How did you explain that she'd spent the last 3 days thinking about gray eyes and a little girl with a teddy bear? "I met someone else," she said finally. "By accident." Jamie leaned forward, curry forgotten. "Okay, you have to tell me everything right now, or I'm going to die of curiosity and it'll be your fault." So Victoria told her. Not everything. She left out the part about damaged baggage and crying at the table. But enough. The little girl who'd appeared beside her. The father who'd invited her to dinner. The ride home through the snow. "Wait." Jamie held up a hand. "Alexander Reed? The architect?" "You know him?" "Vic, everyone knows him. He's been on the cover of like every business magazine for the past 5 years. He's worth, I don't even know, billions probably." Jamie's expression shifted into concern. "Please tell me you Googled him." "I didn't need to Google him." "Oh, honey, you always need to Google them." Jamie was already pulling out her phone. "Here, look." She turned the screen around. Victoria found herself staring at a professional photo of Alex, not the exhausted father from Christmas Eve, but some polished version in a suit, standing in front of a glass skyscraper with his arms crossed. The headline read, "Alexander Reed, the man rebuilding Manhattan." "Keep scrolling," Jamie said. Victoria swiped. More articles. Photos of buildings, of Alex at charity galas, of... She stopped. The photo showed Alex and a woman, both in formal wear at some event. The woman was beautiful, blonde, elegant, smiling at the camera while Alex looked at her like she hung the moon. The caption read, "Alexander and Catherine Reed at the Metropolitan Museum Gala, 6 months before her tragic death." "That was his wife," Jamie said quietly. "Catherine Ashford Reed. She died in a car accident 2 years ago. It was all over the news." Victoria stared at the photo. Catherine looked like the kind of woman who belonged in that world. Polished, sophisticated, perfect. Everything Victoria wasn't. "There's more," Jamie said. "After she died, he basically became a hermit. Stopped going to events, stopped doing interviews. People say he's never gotten over it." "He has a daughter," Victoria said. "Sophie, she's 5. "I know, I remember reading about it. The whole thing was awful." Jamie took her phone back. "Vic, I'm not trying to rain on your parade, but this guy sounds like he's got a lot of baggage. Everyone has baggage. Not like this. Dead wife, billions of dollars, a kid who probably needs therapy. She's in therapy." "Sophie told me." Jamie blinked. "The kid told you she's in therapy?" "She doesn't have a filter." "Clearly." Jamie set down her fork. "Look, I'm just saying, be careful. Rich guys like that, they're not looking for relationships. They're looking for distractions." Victoria's phone buzzed again. "Alex. That came out wrong. I have plans too. Coffee? The place on 52nd you mentioned?" She'd mentioned it in passing during the car ride home, talking about her favorite cafe in the city. The fact that he'd remembered made something flutter in her chest. "Victoria. What time?" "Alex. Is 10 too early? Sophie has a gymnastics thing at 2. Victoria. 10 is perfect. Alex. Great, see you then. Fair warning, she's making me bring Mr. Buttons. Victoria laughed out loud, startling a nurse at the next table. Oh, you're in deep, Jamie observed. I'm not in anything, it's just coffee. With a billionaire and his daughter. With 2 people who were nice to me when I needed it, Jamie sighed. Okay. But if this goes sideways, I'm allowed to say I told you so. Deal. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright, the snow from Christmas Eve already turning to gray slush on the sidewalks. Victoria changed outfits 4 times before settling on jeans and a sweater, casual enough to not look like she was trying too hard, nice enough to not look like she'd given up. Melissa called while she was doing her makeup. "You're going on a date," her best friend said without preamble. "It's not a date, it's coffee. With the guy from Christmas Eve, the one you refused to tell me about." "I told you about him." "You said you met someone. You didn't say he was Alexander Reed." Melissa's voice pitched higher. "Do you know who he is?" "Oh my God, why does everyone keep asking me that?" "Because he's famous, Vic, and rich, and according to Google Images, incredibly hot." Victoria closed her eyes. "You Googled him too?" "Obviously. What kind of best friend would I be if I didn't vet the strange man you met in a restaurant?" Melissa paused. "Although I have to say his daughter is adorable. I found a photo of them at some charity thing last year. She was wearing a little suit." "That sounds like Sophie." "You're already on a first-name basis with the kid?" "She introduced herself. What was I supposed to do, call her Mr. Reed's daughter?" "Batisha Said." Melissa laughed. "Okay, fair point. But seriously, are you ready for this? Because this isn't just coffee with some random guy. This is coffee with a widower who has a child and enough money to buy a small country." "I know what it is." "Do you? Because 3 days ago you were ready to swear off dating forever, and now you're putting on mascara for a man you barely know." Victoria set down the mascara wand. "He gets it." "Gets what?" "Loss. Being broken. Trying to keep going when everything feels impossible." She met her own eyes in the mirror. "I spent 3 years with David feeling like I wasn't enough, like my inability to have kids made me defective. And then Brad, or whatever his name was, sends that text calling me damaged baggage, and I believed him. I believed that's all I was. Vic, But Alex doesn't look at me like that. And Sophie," her voice cracked. "Sophie just saw someone who was sad and decided to fix it. She didn't know anything about me, didn't care that I was divorced or broken or any of it. She just wanted to help." Melissa was quiet for a moment. "Okay, but promise me you'll be careful. Your heart's been through enough. I promise. And text me after. I want details." "You'll get details." "Good. Now go drink coffee with your billionaire." The cafe on 52nd was one of those places that refused to be trendy. Worn wooden tables, mismatched chairs, staff who'd been there for decades and still got orders wrong. Victoria loved it precisely because it felt real in a city that increasingly didn't. She arrived 10 minutes early, ordered a latte, and claimed a table by the window. Outside, people rushed past, bundled in coats, breath steaming in the January air. A woman walked 3 tiny dogs wearing matching sweaters. A man argued with someone on his phone in what sounded like Russian. Normal Saturday morning chaos. Then the door opened and Sophie burst through like a tiny hurricane, Mr. Buttons clutched in one hand. "Victoria!" She spotted her immediately and ran over, Alex trailing behind looking apologetic. "Sophie, we talked about using inside voices." But Sophie had already launched herself at Victoria, wrapping her free arm around her waist. "I missed you. Did you miss me? Dad said you might not come, but I knew you would because you promised, and you seem like someone who keeps promises." Victoria hugged her back, breathing in the scent of child shampoo and something sweet. "I keep my promises." "See, Dad? I told you." Sophie pulled back, holding up Mr. Buttons. "Mr. Buttons missed you too. He's been sad." The teddy bear looked exactly the same, one eye, worn fur, the general air of having been loved within an inch of its life. "I'm sorry to hear that," Victoria said seriously. "How is he now?" Sophie held the bear up to her ear, listening intently. "He says he's better now that he can see you, but he wants hot chocolate." "Sophie..." Alex had finally caught up, looking harried. "We talked about this. Victoria might not want..." "I would love to get Mr. Buttons hot chocolate," Victoria said. Sophie beamed. Alex looked like he was reconsidering every life choice that had led him to this moment. "You don't have to encourage her," he said, but he was smiling. "I'm not encouraging her. I'm making sure Mr. Buttons has a good time." "That's exactly what I said," Sophie agreed. She climbed into the chair next to Victoria, arranging Mr. Buttons carefully on the table between them. "Dad says you work at a hospital and save kids. Is that scary?" "Sometimes," Victoria admitted. "Do kids die?" "Sophie..." Alex looked mortified. "It's okay," Victoria said. She turned to Sophie, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes kids are very sick. and sometimes we can't fix them, but we always try our hardest. Sophie considered this with the gravity that seemed to be her default setting. When Mom died, the doctors tried really hard, but they couldn't fix her either. Alex had gone very still. That must have been really scary, Victoria said softly. I don't remember it very well. I was only 3. Sophie traced patterns on the table with one finger. But Dad remembers. Sometimes he still cries about it. Sophie, Alex's voice was rough. What? You do. I hear you. Sophie looked at him matter-of-factly. It's okay to cry, Dad. You told me that. Victoria watched Alex struggle with this, watched him try to find the right response while his daughter stared at him with those 2 old eyes. Finally, he just sighed and sat down heavily in the remaining chair. You're right, he said quietly. I do cry sometimes. Because you miss her. Because I miss her. Sophie nodded, apparently satisfied, and turned back to Victoria. Do you cry about your broken marriage? Jesus, Alex muttered. Victoria found herself smiling despite the heaviness of the conversation. Sometimes, yeah. That's good. Crying is healthy. My therapist says so. Sophie swung her legs under the table. She also says it's good to talk about feelings instead of keeping them locked up inside where they get all moldy. Your therapist says feelings get moldy? Alex looked skeptical. Well, she said toxic, but that's basically the same thing. Sophie turned to Victoria. Do you have a therapist? I did, after my divorce. Did it help? Victoria thought about the year of sessions, talking through her failure to conceive, her marriage falling apart, the loneliness that had consumed her. A little. It's hard work. Everything good is hard work, Sophie said wisely. That's what Nana tells me. A waitress appeared, elderly, with reading glasses on a chain and the name tag that said Doris, and took their orders with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. Hot chocolate for Sophie and Mr. Buttons, coffee for Alex, another latte for Victoria. Anything to eat? Doris asked. Sophie perked up. Do you have cookies? What kind? Chocolate chip? We got chocolate chip. Can Mr. Buttons have one? Doris peered at the teddy bear. He looks hungry. Better make it 2. Sophie giggled as Doris shuffled away. She's nice, Sophie declared. I like old people. They don't pretend things are okay when they're not. Alex rubbed his temples. Where do you get this stuff? From you, probably, and Nana, and Dr. Sarah. Sophie started making Mr. Buttons walk across the table. And from watching people. People are interesting when they don't know you're watching. That's slightly concerning, Alex said. Why? Everyone watches everyone. That's how you learn things. Victoria caught Alex's eye across the table and saw her own amusement reflected there. This child was something else entirely. So, Sophie said, turning her attention back to Victoria. Dad wants to know if you have a boyfriend, but he's too scared to ask. Alex choked on nothing. That's not, Sophie, we talked about this. You said you wanted to know if she was dating anyone. I said that in private, in the car, where you were supposed to be listening to music. I was listening to music, but I also heard you talking to yourself. Sophie looked at Victoria. He does that a lot. Talks to himself. It's how I know what he's really thinking. Victoria tried very hard not to laugh. I don't have a boyfriend. Good, Sophie said. Then, registering Alex's expression, What? It is good. If she had a boyfriend, she wouldn't be able to have coffee with us. That's not how it works. That's exactly how it works. Melissa has a boyfriend, and she never has time for anything fun anymore. She told me at the Christmas thing. Sophie turned to Victoria. Do you want a boyfriend? Sophie, actually, Victoria said, I'm not sure what I want. I spent a long time thinking I wanted one thing, and when it didn't work out, I realized I didn't know what to want instead. Sophie nodded like this made perfect sense. Dad's like that too. Everyone keeps trying to set him up with ladies, but he always says no because he doesn't know what he wants either. Okay, that's it. Alex stood up. Sophie, come with me. We're going to have a conversation about boundaries. What did I do? You know what you did. Sophie looked genuinely confused. I'm just talking. You're sharing things that are private, but they're true things. That doesn't mean you should say them out loud. Alex glanced at Victoria. I'm sorry. We'll be right back. He guided Sophie toward the back of the cafe, near the bathrooms, leaving Victoria alone with Mr. Buttons. She could see them talking. Alex crouched down to Sophie's level, speaking quietly, while Sophie listened with her arms crossed. This was a mistake, Victoria thought suddenly. Not coffee. The whole thing, getting involved with this family. Alex was clearly still grieving his wife. Sophie needed stability, not some random woman who'd appeared in their lives by accident, and Victoria herself was in no position to be anyone's savior. She should leave. Make some excuse about work, slip out before they came back, send a polite text later thanking them for coffee. But then Sophie looked over at her and smiled, this small, hopeful smile that made Victoria's chest ache, and she knew she wasn't going anywhere. They returned a few minutes later, Sophie looking chastened and Alex looking exhausted. "I'm sorry," Sophie said quietly. "Dad says I was being rude by asking personal questions." "You weren't rude," Victoria said. "Yes, she was," Alex countered. "We talked about this. Just because you're curious doesn't mean—" "Alex?" Victoria waited until he looked at her. "It's okay. Really." He searched her face for signs of discomfort, then slowly sat back down. "Okay, but if she starts interrogating you about your tax returns or something, I'm putting her in timeout." "I don't even know what tax returns are," Sophie said. "Let's keep it that way." Doris returned with their drinks and cookies, setting everything down with practiced efficiency. Sophie immediately began the elaborate process of making sure Mr. Buttons got his hot chocolate at the right temperature, complete with sound effects. "She's always like this?" Victoria asked Alex quietly. "Pretty much. Her therapist says she's processing her mother's death by trying to control her environment." He watched Sophie with a mixture of love and concern. "Or she's just naturally bossy. Hard to tell. Maybe both. Probably both." He turned his coffee cup in slow circles, not drinking. "I'm sorry about earlier, the personal questions. She doesn't understand boundaries yet. Most 5-year-olds don't." "She's not most 5-year-olds." "No," Victoria agreed. "She's not." They were quiet for a moment, watching Sophie conduct a detailed conversation with Mr. Buttons about cookie distribution. "Can I ask you something?" Alex said. "As long as it's not about my tax returns." His mouth twitched. "Why did you come today? You could have made an excuse, could have ghosted me after Christmas Eve. But you showed up." Victoria considered her answer. "I wanted to see Sophie again." "Just Sophie?" She met his eyes. "No, not just Sophie." Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or recognition. "I haven't done this in a long time." "Done what?" "This, coffee. Getting to know someone." He set down his cup. "I'm probably going to be terrible at it." "That's okay. I'm probably going to be terrible at it too." "So we'll be terrible together?" "Sounds like a plan." Sophie looked up from her conversation with Mr. Buttons. "Are you guys done being weird and nervous? Because it's making Mr. Buttons uncomfortable." Alex laughed. A real laugh that made him look younger, less burdened. "Sorry, Mr. Buttons." "He forgives you. But he wants to know if Victoria can come to my gymnastics thing later." "Sophie, please, it's boring when it's just you watching. You always look at your phone." "I do not." Alex stopped. "Okay, sometimes I look at my phone, but that's because I have work. See? Boring." Sophie turned to Victoria. "Will you come? It's not very far and I'm really good at cartwheels." Victoria glanced at Alex, who looked like he was trying to telepathically communicate something. Apology, maybe, or permission to say no. "I'd love to," Victoria said. Sophie squealed. "Yes, this is the best day ever. Wait until I tell Emma. She thinks her mom is cool, but she's not as cool as you." "I'm not your mom," Victoria said gently. Sophie's face fell. "I know, but maybe you could be like a practice mom? Like how I practice piano even though I'm not very good yet?" Alex looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "Sophie, we really need to talk about the things you say." "But that's what Dr. Sarah said. She said it's okay to imagine what having a mom would be like, that it's part of processing my feelings." "Dr. Sarah said you could imagine it privately," Alex said, "not recruit random women in coffee shops." "Victoria's not random. She's our friend." "Even so, Kiki, I think," Victoria interrupted carefully, "what your dad is trying to say is that these are big feelings, and big feelings need time." Sophie considered this. "How much time?" "I don't know. That's something we'd have to figure out together. But you're not saying no? Victoria's throat tightened. I'm not saying no. Good. Sophie took a triumphant bite of cookie. Mr. Buttons thinks you should come to dinner at our house sometime, too. He wants to show you his room. Mr. Buttons has a room? Victoria asked. Obviously. Where else would he sleep? Alex had his head in his hands. This is not how I imagined today going. How did you imagine it? Victoria asked. He looked up at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her breath catch. I don't know. More awkward small talk? Less enthusiastic matchmaking for my daughter? Disappointment? Maybe a little. Sorry to disappoint you by not disappointing you. He smiled. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. They stayed at the cafe for another hour, conversation drifting from topic to topic, while Sophie provided running commentary and Mr. Buttons judged them all silently. Victoria learned that Alex had designed his first building at 26, that Sophie wanted to be a veterinarian or an astronaut, or possibly both, that Alex couldn't cook anything more complicated than scrambled eggs. That's so sad, Sophie said. Even I can make mac and cheese. Box mac and cheese doesn't count. It counts if it's edible. That's a low bar. Your scrambled eggs set off the smoke alarm last week. That's a lower bar. Victoria laughed so hard she nearly spilled her latte. She's got you there. Whose side are you on? Alex demanded, but he was grinning. Mr. Button's side. He remains neutral in all conflicts. Smart bear. The gymnastics place was in a converted warehouse in Chelsea. All exposed brick and padded mats and children shrieking at frequencies that probably violated noise ordinances. Sophie ran off to join her class, a dozen girls around her age, all wearing matching leotards, while Alex and Victoria claimed seats in the observation area with the other parents. Fair warning, Alex said. This might be the most boring hour of your life. I doubt that. You haven't seen 5-year-old gymnastics. It's a lot of somersaults and confusion. But watching Sophie tumble across the mats, her face scrunched in concentration, Victoria felt something settle in her chest. This was normal. This was what families did. Sat in uncomfortable chairs watching their kids do cartwheels, making small talk with other parents, stealing glances at each other when they thought no one was looking. She's good, Victoria said as Sophie executed a surprisingly clean cartwheel. She gets that from her mother. Catherine was a dancer. Alex's voice went quiet. Before we met, she performed with a company in Boston. Modern dance, the kind I didn't understand, but pretended to. It was the first time he'd mentioned his wife by name. Victoria held very still, afraid to break whatever had made him willing to talk about her. Sophie doesn't remember her dancing, Alex continued. She was too young. But sometimes I see Catherine in the way she moves, and it's like... He stopped. Like she's still here, Victoria finished softly. Yeah. They watched Sophie attempt a forward roll, get tangled in her own limbs, and come up laughing. Do you think about your ex? Alex asked. When you imagine having kids? Victoria hadn't expected the question. Sometimes, but the kids I imagine now don't look like his. They don't look like anyone, really. They're just possibility. That must be hard. Harder than it should be. She pulled her sleeves over her hands. I spent so long mourning children I'll never have that I forgot to figure out who I am without them. I did the opposite. Spent so long being Sophie's dad that I forgot who Alex was. He leaned back in his chair. We're both kind of a mess, huh? Spectacular messes. At least we're honest about it. Sophie waved at them from across the room, nearly toppling another girl in the process. They waved back. Can I tell you something? Alex said. Sure. When Sophie ran up to you at the restaurant, I was planning to apologize and leave. Go home, order takeout, let her fall asleep watching movies while I worked. Same thing we do every year. He glanced at Victoria. But then you said yes to dinner, and Sophie smiled for the first time all week, and I thought, maybe this Christmas doesn't have to be awful. Was it? Awful? It was the least awful Christmas we've had in 2 years, which sounds pathetic, but it doesn't sound pathetic. Victoria turned to face him. It sounds honest. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and typed something back. Work? Victoria asked. Always. He pocketed the phone. Sorry, there's a project deadline, and my project manager is panicking because the contractors found structural issues we didn't account for. Sounds stressful. It's normal. Construction always has surprises. He rubbed his eyes. But yeah, it's stressful. When's the last time you took a day off? Alex laughed. Define day off. A day where you don't check your email or think about buildings or do anything work-related? Then never. I've never taken a day off. That's not healthy. Neither is most of my life. He said it like a joke, but Victoria heard the truth underneath. The class ended with Sophie running over, sweaty and triumphant, demanding to know if they'd seen her cartwheel. It was perfect, Victoria said. It really was, Alex agreed. Emma's mom said it was good, but not as good as Emma's, but Emma fell down twice, so I think her mom is lying. Sophie grabbed her water bottle. Can we get ice cream, please? I did really good today. You did really well, Alex corrected. And it's freezing outside. Ice cream is good all the time, Dad. That's science. I don't think that's science. It is. Victoria, tell him it's science. Victoria held up her hands. I'm staying out of this one. They ended up at an ice cream place anyway, because apparently Alex couldn't say no to Sophie when she used her serious voice, sitting at a tiny table while Sophie worked her way through a cone twice the size of her head. You're a terrible influence, Alex told Victoria. I didn't say anything. You smiled. That's basically permission. I'll try to look more disapproving next time. Please don't. Your smile is... He stopped, looking flustered. Never mind. My smile is what? Nothing. Forget I said anything. But Sophie had heard. Dad thinks you're pretty. He told Nana on the phone. Alex looked like he wanted to die. Sophie? What? You did. You said she was pretty and nice and made you feel less sad. I hate children, Alex muttered. No, you don't, Sophie said cheerfully. You love me. That's debatable right now. Victoria was trying very hard not to laugh. For the record, I think you're pretty too. Alex met her eyes. Pretty? Okay, maybe not pretty. Handsome? Is that better? Marginally. Sophie looked between them, ice cream forgotten. Are you guys doing the thing where you like each other but you're too scared to say it? Sophie, because that's what happens in movies. People like each other, but they dance around it forever until someone finally just says it. She licked her ice cream thoughtfully. It's very inefficient. Alex dropped his head into his hands. I give up. She wins. I don't know what she wins, but she wins. I win Victoria coming to dinner, Sophie announced. Tomorrow night, at our house. Dad makes terrible pasta, but we can order pizza instead. Sophie, you can't just invite people. Why not? You like her. She likes you. Mr. Buttons likes everyone. It's perfect. Victoria watched Alex struggle with this, watched him try to find a reason to say no that wouldn't hurt his daughter's feelings. It's okay, Victoria said quietly. If this is too much, too fast? It's not that. Alex looked at her, and the loneliness in his eyes was so familiar it hurt. I just don't want to mess this up. Mess what up? Whatever this is, this... He gestured between them. You're the first person in 2 years who doesn't look at me like I'm broken, who doesn't treat Sophie like she's fragile. And if I do this wrong, if we move too fast or I say the wrong thing, then we'll deal with it, Victoria said. Together, like adults who are both kind of a mess. Sophie nodded approvingly. That's good. I like that. Alex was still watching Victoria, something complicated working across his face. Finally, he said, Okay, dinner tomorrow, but I'm warning you now, our apartment is chaos. I work in a pediatric ward. I'm familiar with chaos. This is different. This is billionaire with dead wife and precocious child chaos. Even better. Sophie cheered, nearly dropping her ice cream. This is the best weekend ever. Wait until I tell Dr. Sarah. She's going to be so proud of me for using my words and expressing my needs. Your therapist is creating a monster, Alex said. A very emotionally healthy monster, Sophie corrected. They walked Victoria to the subway afterward, Sophie between them holding both their hands. The afternoon had gone gray, clouds pressing low over the city, threatening more snow. Thank you for today, Alex said at the top of the stairs, for putting up with us. I wasn't putting up with anything. Still. He hesitated, then, I meant what I said earlier about not wanting to mess this up. You won't. You don't know that. Neither do you. Victoria squeezed his hand. So maybe we just see what happens. He smiled, tired but real. Yeah, okay. Sophie hugged her goodbye, making Victoria promise to come early tomorrow so she could show her Mr. Button's room properly. Then Victoria descended into the subway, joining the Saturday afternoon crowd heading home. Her phone buzzed before the train arrived. Alex. Sophie's already planning the menu for tomorrow. Apparently pizza is too boring. Now she wants to make something called friendship spaghetti. Victoria. Is that different from regular spaghetti? Alex. According to her, yes. It involves extra love and probably too much cheese. Victoria. Sounds perfect. Alex. You say that now. Wait until you see our kitchen. The train pulled in and Victoria found a seat, watching Brooklyn pass by outside the windows. Tomorrow she'd go to Alex's apartment. Tomorrow she'd see how he lived, meet his world properly, maybe start to understand what this thing between them actually was. Tomorrow felt like possibility. Her phone buzzed again. Alex, I'm glad you came today. Victoria, me too. Alex, Sophie's already asleep. Ice cream coma. She's holding Mr. Buttons and smiling. Victoria, send me a picture? A moment later, an image appeared. Sophie curled up on a couch in what looked like an enormous living room. Mr. Buttons tucked under her chin, her face peaceful in sleep. Victoria saved the photo, her throat tight. Victoria, she's beautiful. Alex, she is. She gets that from her mother, too. Victoria, and from you. Alex, I don't know about that. Victoria, I do. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Alex, you make this easier being around you. I don't know how to explain it better than that. Victoria, you don't have to explain it. I feel it too. Victoria got off at her stop, climbed the stairs to street level, walked the 3 blocks to her building. Inside her apartment, she stood at the window watching snow begin to fall again over Brooklyn. Somewhere in Manhattan, a little girl slept holding a teddy bear. Somewhere in Manhattan, a man she barely knew was probably working too late, drinking cold coffee, carrying weight no one should carry alone. And somehow, impossibly, Victoria had become part of their orbit. She didn't know if this would work, didn't know if she was strong enough to love a man still in love with a ghost, or brave enough to let herself care for a child who might not need her tomorrow. But for the first time in 3 years, she wanted to try. Her phone lit up one more time. Alex. See you tomorrow, Victoria. Victoria. See you tomorrow, Alex. Outside, snow fell harder, covering the city in white that looked almost clean in the streetlight glow. Victoria curled up on her couch, phone in hand, and let herself hope. Just a little. Just enough. Victoria stood outside Alex's building on Central Park West at 6:57 Sunday evening, staring up at the limestone facade and wondering what the hell she was doing. The building looked like old money, the kind with a doorman in a uniform and probably a co-op board that vetted residents harder than the FBI. She'd changed clothes 3 times before settling on black pants and a cream sweater. Nothing too formal, nothing too casual. Her hands were sweating despite the January cold. This was insane. She'd known this man for a week. 1 week, and here she was about to have dinner at his home, meet his space, pretend like this was normal. Her phone buzzed. Alex. Sophie's watching for you from the window. She says you're standing on the sidewalk looking nervous. Victoria looked up. 17 floors was too high to see faces clearly, but she could make out a small figure pressed against glass, waving frantically. Victoria. I'm not nervous. Alex. She says you're lying. Victoria. Your daughter is very observant. Alex. Tell me about it. Coming up? Victoria took a breath and pushed through the heavy brass door. The lobby was exactly what she expected. Marble floors, crystal chandelier, furniture that probably cost more than her car. The doorman looked up from his desk. Can I help you? I'm here to see Alexander Reed. He's expecting me. The doorman's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. He picked up a phone, spoke quietly, then hung up. 17th floor, elevators to your left. The elevator was the old-fashioned kind with an operator, an elderly man who greeted her with a nod and pressed the button for 17 without asking. The ride up was silent, except for the mechanical hum of cables and pulleys. Mr. Reed doesn't have many visitors, the operator said as they approached the 17th floor. It wasn't a question, but Victoria felt compelled to respond anyway. I'm a friend. Good. The little one could use more friends around. The doors opened. "Have a nice evening, miss." There were only 2 doors on the entire floor. Before Victoria could figure out which one was Alex's, the door on the right flew open and Sophie appeared, still in her gymnastics leotard from yesterday, hair wild. "You came! Dad said you would, but I was worried you'd change your mind because sometimes grown-ups do that." She grabbed Victoria's hand. "Come on, you have to see everything. We have 17 rooms, but I've only counted 14, so maybe I'm wrong or maybe there are secret rooms." "Sophie, let her breathe." Alex appeared behind his daughter, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that had seen better days. He looked more relaxed than Victoria had seen him, but there was tension around his eyes. "Sorry, she's been watching the elevator for 20 minutes. "I wanted to make sure you didn't get lost," Sophie said. "This building is very big and confusing." Victoria stepped inside and immediately understood what Alex meant by chaos. The apartment was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, exposed brick walls, hardwood floors that gleamed under soft lighting. But it was also clearly lived in by a single father and a 5-year-old. Toys scattered across the living room floor, a fort made of cushions in one corner, papers covering the dining table, Sophie's drawings taped to the walls alongside what looked like expensive modern art. "Sorry about the mess," Alex said. "I tried to clean, but Sophie helpfully undid most of my work." "I was playing," Sophie protested. "You can't clean up while people are playing. That's a rule." "Is it?" "Yes, I just made it." The apartment smelled like tomato sauce and garlic bread. Through an archway, Victoria could see into a massive kitchen where pots bubbled on the stove. "You're actually cooking?" she asked. Alex looked offended. "I said I was a bad cook. I didn't say I wouldn't try." "He's been cooking for 2 hours," Sophie whispered loudly, "and he's already burned the bread twice." "3 times," Alex corrected. "But who's counting?" Sophie dragged Victoria through the apartment, providing running commentary on everything. Her room was painted lavender with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Mr. Buttons did indeed have his own bed, a small wooden frame with tiny sheets and a pillow. "This is where he sleeps when he's not with me," Sophie explained seriously. "He likes his privacy." Alex's office was next, all dark wood and leather chairs, one wall completely covered with architectural drawings and another with photographs. Victoria recognized some of them from the articles Jamie had shown her. The Hudson Yards Tower, a museum in Chicago, something that looked like it belonged in Dubai. "Dad designed all of these," Sophie said proudly. "He's really smart." "I can see that." "He works too much, though. Sometimes he falls asleep at his desk, and I have to wake him up for breakfast." Alex, leaning against the doorframe, didn't deny it. They skipped several rooms, guest bedrooms apparently, that no one ever used, and ended up in the master bedroom. Victoria caught a glimpse before Sophie pulled her away, but what she saw made her chest tight. It was sparse, almost hotel-like, as if Alex was just passing through rather than living there. The only personal touches were photographs on the nightstand. She couldn't see them clearly, but she knew who they showed. "And this is the library," Sophie announced, throwing open another door. The room took Victoria's breath away. 3 walls of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a window seat overlooking the park, comfortable chairs arranged around a fireplace. It was the kind of room she'd dreamed about as a child. "Mom loved this room," Sophie said quietly. "Dad says she read 3 books a week. I'm trying to read that much, but I'm not very fast yet." Victoria crouched down to Sophie's level. "Reading isn't a race, sweetie. It's about enjoying the story." "That's what Dad says, too." Sophie touched the spine of a book on a lower shelf. "Sometimes I come in here and it smells like her. Dad says that's impossible because she's been gone too long, but I still smell it. Flowers and something else I can't name." Alex had gone very still in the doorway. "I think that's lovely," Victoria said softly, "that you remember that about her." "Do you think she'd be mad? That you're here?" The question hung in the air. Victoria glanced at Alex, but he looked as lost as she felt. "I don't know," Victoria admitted, "but I think if she loved you and your dad, she'd want you both to be happy. And if having me here makes you happy, even a little bit, then maybe she'd be okay with it." Sophie considered this with her characteristic seriousness. "Okay, I think that makes sense." Then brightening, "Want to see my drawings? I made one of you." Before Victoria could respond, Sophie was dragging her back toward the living room, the heavy moment broken by childhood enthusiasm. Alex caught Victoria's arm as Sophie ran ahead. "Thank you," he said quietly. For what? For not making that weird. For not pretending Catherine doesn't exist. His voice was rough. Most people avoid mentioning her around Sophie, like if we don't talk about her, it'll hurt less. Does it hurt less? No, it just makes her feel more gone. They followed Sophie into the living room where she was already pulling out a portfolio of drawings. Victoria sat on the floor accepting papers covered in crayon and marker, rainbows, unicorns, what might have been a dragon or possibly a dog. "This one's you," Sophie said, holding up a drawing of a stick figure with yellow hair and a big smile. "See? You're smiling because you're happy. And this is me, and this is Dad, and this is Mr. Buttons. We're all holding hands." In the drawing, the four of them stood in front of a house with a sun overhead and flowers everywhere. A family portrait that wasn't quite real, but might be someday. "It's beautiful," Victoria said, her throat tight. "You can keep it if you want." "Really?" "Yeah, I make lots of drawings. Dad has to buy new paper all the time." Sophie paused. "Do you have a refrigerator? Because that's where good drawings go." "I do have a refrigerator." "Then it should go there, in the place of honor. That's the middle, where everyone can see it." Victoria carefully rolled up the drawing. "Place of honor. Got it." Alex's phone rang from somewhere in the kitchen. He excused himself, and Victoria heard him answer, his voice shifting into business mode. Sophie seemed unbothered, already moving on to show Victoria a complicated Lego structure that was either a castle or a space station. "Dad has to work a lot," Sophie said, not looking up from the Legos. "Even when he doesn't want to. He says it's because we need money, but I think it's because he doesn't know what else to do." "What do you mean?" Sophie finally looked at her. "When people are sad, they fill up their time so they don't have to think about being sad. That's what Dr. Sarah says. Dad fills his time with work." "You're very wise for 5. 5 3/4, Sophie corrected, "and I'm not wise. I just pay attention." She added another Lego brick to her structure. "What do you do when you're sad?" Victoria thought about the question. "I work too, I guess. Or I spend time with my friend Melissa and her family. Sometimes I just watch sad movies and cry." "Does crying help?" "Sometimes. It depends on the kind of sad." "There are different kinds?" "Yeah, there's missing someone sad, and disappointed sad, and lonely sad. They all feel different." Sophie nodded. "I get lonely sad a lot, even when Dad's here. Is that normal?" Victoria's heart broke a little. "Very normal. You can be surrounded by people and still feel alone sometimes. That's what I told Dr. Sarah. She said it's okay to feel that way." Sophie looked toward the kitchen where Alex's voice had risen slightly, frustrated about something. "Dad gets lonely sad too. I can tell. He tries to hide it, but I always know." Before Victoria could respond, Alex returned, running a hand through his hair. "Sorry, work crisis. Apparently the permits for the Brooklyn project are held up," and he stopped, seeing their faces. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Sophie said quickly. "We were just talking about sad feelings." "Jesus, Sophie." "What?" "You said honesty is important. Honesty about our own feelings, not interrogating guests about theirs." "I wasn't interrogating. I was having a conversation." Sophie stood up, hugging Mr. Buttons. "I'm going to wash my hands for dinner. Come on, Mr. Buttons. You need to wash your paws too." She disappeared down the hall, leaving Alex and Victoria alone in the living room. "I'm sorry," Alex said immediately. "She doesn't understand boundaries, and I'm clearly failing as a parent and—" "Alex," Victoria stood up. "Stop. She's fine. You're fine. We were just talking about sad feelings on your first visit to our apartment. Normal stuff." "It is normal. For us, anyway." Victoria stepped closer to him. "Your daughter is processing her mother's death. I'm processing a failed marriage. You're processing both those things, plus running a company and raising a kid alone. Of course we talk about sad feelings. What else would we talk about?" Alex stared at her. "Most people would talk about the weather or sports or literally anything else." "I don't know anything about sports. Neither do I." "Then I guess we're stuck with sad feelings." He laughed, surprised. "You're really weird. You know that?" Says the billionaire who let his daughter adopt a stranger on Christmas Eve. Fair point. They stood there for a moment, close enough that Victoria could see the silver threading through Alex's dark hair at his temples, the tired lines around his eyes, the small scar on his chin that she hadn't noticed before. The food's probably burning, Alex said, not moving. Probably. I should check on it. You should. Neither of them moved. Then Sophie's voice rang out from the bathroom. Dad, Mr. Buttons dropped his toothbrush in the toilet. Alex closed his eyes. Of course he did. Do stuffed bears need toothbrushes? In this house they do, Sophie insisted. She has a whole hygiene routine for him. He headed toward the bathroom. I'll be right back. Make yourself at home. There's wine in the kitchen if you want it. Victoria wandered into the kitchen while Alex dealt with the toothbrush crisis. The space was sleek and modern, all stainless steel and marble countertops, but also clearly functional. A child's step stool by the sink, crayon drawings held to the fridge with magnets, a shopping list in Alex's handwriting that included items like goldfish crackers and more Band-Aids. The pot on the stove was indeed burning. Victoria turned down the heat, stirring the sauce before it scorched completely. She found garlic bread in the oven, only slightly charred this time, and pulled it out. You're hired, Alex said, reappearing with Sophie. Seriously, whatever you're currently making, I'll double it if you just cook for us. I thought you were trying. Trying and succeeding are different things. He surveyed the kitchen. How bad is it? Salvageable. Barely. See, Sophie said. I told you we should have ordered pizza. We're not ordering pizza. I said I'd cook dinner, and I'm cooking dinner. Burning isn't cooking, Dad. It's a style of cooking, blackened, very trendy. Sophie giggled. That's not a real thing. It absolutely is. Tell her, Victoria. Victoria held up her hands. I'm staying neutral. Traitor, Alex muttered, but he was smiling. They managed to salvage enough for a decent meal. Pasta with barely burned sauce, garlic bread that was more toasted than charred, salad that Alex claimed credit for, despite Sophie doing most of the work. They ate at the dining table after clearing off the papers, Sophie providing running commentary on everything from her teacher's new haircut to her theory that pigeons were actually tiny dinosaurs. They're birds, Alex said patiently. Birds are dinosaurs. We learned that in science. Birds descended from dinosaurs. They're not actually Same thing. It's really not. You're just mad because I'm right. Victoria watched them bicker, watched the easy familiarity of it, and felt something shift in her chest. This was what she'd been missing. Not the penthouse or the view or the expensive furniture, just this simple intimacy of family dinner, of belonging somewhere. Victoria? Sophie was looking at her. Are you okay? You look sad again. I'm not sad. I'm happy. Then why do you look sad? Sometimes happy and sad feel the same. They're both big feelings. Sophie absorbed this. That's confusing. Very confusing. After dinner, Sophie insisted on showing Victoria how to build a proper blanket fort. They used couch cushions, dining chairs, and every spare blanket in the apartment, creating an elaborate structure that took up half the living room. This is the entrance, Sophie explained, crawling through a narrow opening. And this is the main room where we have meetings. And this is Mr. Button's private chamber because he needs alone time sometimes. Alex watched from the couch, laptop open but ignored. My living room looks like a refugee camp. It looks like magic, Sophie corrected. Right, Victoria? Definitely magic. They spent an hour in the fort, Sophie telling elaborate stories involving princesses and dragons, and Mr. Button saving the day. Alex eventually joined them, folding his too-tall frame into the cramped space, his shoulder pressed against Victoria's. This is ridiculous, he said. This is fun, Sophie countered. When's the last time you did something fun, Dad? He thought about it. I don't remember. That's sad. You should do fun things more. I'm doing a fun thing right now, because I made you. If I didn't make you, you'd be working. Alex didn't deny it. Sophie fell asleep around 9, curled up in Victoria's lap with Mr. Buttons tucked under her chin. Her breathing evened out, her face peaceful in a way that made Victoria's chest ache. I should put her to bed, Alex whispered. In a minute. They sat there in the blanket fort, Sophie sleeping between them, the city glittering through the windows beyond. Victoria had been in this apartment for less than 4 hours, and already it felt more like home than her own place ever had. This is weird, right? Alex said quietly. Very weird. But good weird? Yeah, good weird. He carefully scooped up Sophie, who mumbled something about dragons but didn't wake. Victoria followed them to Sophie's room, watching Alex tuck her in with practiced ease, kissing her forehead, adjusting Mr. Buttons in her arms. "Sleep tight, sweetheart," he whispered. Back in the living room, they collapsed the fort in silence, folding blankets, rearranging furniture. The comfortable silence of people who'd known each other longer than a week. "Want more wine?" Alex asked. "Sure." They ended up on the balcony despite the cold, wrapped in blankets, looking out over Central Park. The trees were bare and dark, snow still clinging to branches, the reservoir a black mirror reflecting city lights. "I don't do this enough," Alex said. "Do what?" "Stop. Look at things. Breathe." He took a sip of wine. "I'm always moving, always working, always thinking about the next project or deadline or crisis. But right now, right here, everything's quiet. Is that good or bad? I don't know yet." He turned to look at her. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why aren't you running?" Victoria blinked. "What?" "This." He gestured between them. "Me, Sophie, all of it. We're a mess. I'm a widower who works too much and doesn't know how to cook. My daughter attaches to strangers and talks about death like it's the weather. We live in this ridiculous apartment that's too big and too empty. You should be running." "Should I?" "Most people would." Victoria pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "You want honesty?" "Always. I spent 3 years with someone who made me feel defective because my body couldn't do what it was supposed to. Then I spent another year alone, convincing myself I was better off that way. Then some asshole sends me a text calling me damaged baggage, and I believed him." She met Alex's eyes. "But then Sophie saw me crying in a restaurant and decided I needed help. She didn't know I was broken. She just knew I was sad. And somehow that made it okay to be both. You're not broken. Neither are you. But we're both trying to figure out how to keep going after everything fell apart." She reached over, took his hand. "So, no, I'm not running. Because for the first time in years, I don't feel alone. And that's worth staying for." Alex was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Catherine would have liked you." The statement landed like a stone in still water. "You don't have to say that," Victoria said. "I'm not saying it to make you feel better. I'm saying it because it's true." He looked down at their joined hands. "She would have liked that Sophie likes you, that you let her talk about death without making it weird, that you didn't run when she asked you to be her practice mom. That was honest. It was honest." Alex's thumb traced circles on her palm. "I love Catherine. I'll probably always love her in some way. But she's gone, and I'm here, and Sophie's here, and we're trying to figure out how to keep living. And you—" He stopped. "I what?" "You make it easier. You make all of it easier. And that terrifies me." "Why?" "Because what if you figure out this is too much? What if you wake up one day and realize you signed up for more than you bargained for? What if—" Victoria kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't graceful. She just leaned over and pressed her lips to his, cutting off the spiral of what-ifs. He froze for half a second, then kissed her back, his hand coming up to cup her face. When they pulled apart, he was staring at her like he'd forgotten how to speak. "Sorry," Victoria whispered. "You were spiraling." "I was. Feel better?" "I don't know. Maybe kiss me again and I'll let you know." She did. This time slower, softer, his fingers threading through her hair while her hand rested against his chest where she could feel his heart racing. "Better," he said when they broke apart. "Good." They sat there for a while longer, Victoria's head on Alex's shoulder, his arm around her waist, both of them looking out at the park and the city beyond. The temperature dropped and their wine went cold, but neither of them moved. "I should go," Victoria said eventually. "It's late." "Stay." She pulled back to look at him. "What?" "Stay. Not like, we have guest rooms, plural. You could take one. Sophie would love waking up and finding you here." He was stumbling over his words, nervous. "Unless that's too weird." "It's probably too weird. Forget I said anything." "It's not too weird." "No?" "No." Victoria smiled. "But I need to work tomorrow. Early shift." "Right. Of course." He stood, pulling her up with him. "I'll get you a car." "I can take the subway." "It's almost midnight. You're not taking the subway." They argued about it while gathering her things. but Alex won by the simple expedient of already having called his driver before Victoria could stop him. At the door, Sophie appeared in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "You're leaving." She sounded devastated. "I have work tomorrow, sweetie." "But you just got here." "I've been here for 5 hours." "That's not very long." Sophie hugged her waist. "When can you come back?" Victoria looked at Alex, who looked back at her with something like hope in his eyes. "Soon," Victoria said. "I promise." "How soon?" "Sophie," Alex started. "This week," Victoria said. "I'll come back this week." Sophie's face lit up. "Really? Really? Can we make cookies? I know a recipe. It only failed one time." "Only one time? Okay, 3 times. But the 4th time will work. I can feel it." Alex groaned. "We're never getting our security deposit back." In the elevator, Victoria leaned against the wall, trying to process what had just happened. She'd kissed Alex. She'd kissed Alex, and it had been good. And now she'd promised to come back and make cookies with his daughter, and somehow this had become her life. The driver was waiting outside, the same one from Christmas Eve. He nodded at her in the rearview mirror. "Good evening, miss." "Hi." They drove in silence for a while, crossing the park toward the east side. Victoria watched the city slide past, still trying to make sense of everything. Her phone buzzed. Alex. "Sophie wants me to tell you that Mr. Buttons had a wonderful time and hopes you did too." Victoria. "Tell Mr. Buttons the feeling is mutual." Alex. "She's also making me write down the cookie recipe right now so we don't forget to buy ingredients." Victoria. "What's in it?" Alex. "Chocolate chips, obviously, and something called extra sugar, which I don't think is a real measurement." Victoria. "Sounds perfect." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Alex. "Thank you for tonight, for staying, for not running, for kissing me when I was spiraling." Victoria. "You're welcome. Thank you for burning dinner and sharing your daughter and not being perfect." Alex. "Not being perfect is my specialty." Victoria. "Mine too." The car pulled up outside her building. Victoria thanked the driver and climbed out, the cold hitting her immediately after the warm interior. Her apartment felt smaller than usual when she let herself in. Darker. Emptier. She stood in the middle of the living room, still wearing her coat, Sophie's drawing clutched in her hand. On her refrigerator, she cleared a space right in the middle, the place of honor, and stuck the drawing there with a magnet. 4 stick figures holding hands in front of a house under a bright sun. A family that wasn't hers but might be someday. Her phone buzzed one more time. Alex. "I'm glad you came tonight." Victoria. "Me too." Alex. "Sophie's already planning your next visit. Fair warning, it involves a tea party. Mr. Buttons is very excited." Victoria. "I'll bring my finest tea party attire." Alex. "Looking forward to it. Good night, Victoria." Victoria. "Good night, Alex." She took a shower, changed into pajamas, crawled into bed. But sleep didn't come easily. She kept thinking about Alex's apartment, Sophie's room with the glow-in-the-dark stars, the library that smelled like Catherine, the blanket fort where a little girl had fallen asleep in her lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. She kept thinking about the kiss on the balcony, Alex's hand in her hair, the way he'd looked at her like she was something precious and terrifying. She kept thinking about how quickly this had all happened, how completely wrong it was by every normal measure, how absolutely right it felt anyway. Melissa was going to lose her mind. Jamie was going to say, "I told you so." Victoria didn't care. For the first time in 3 years, she had something to look forward to. Something that wasn't just getting through the day or surviving another holiday alone or convincing herself that this was enough. It wasn't enough. It never had been. But maybe, possibly, this thing with Alex and Sophie could be. She fell asleep with her phone on her pillow, Sophie's drawing visible on the refrigerator through her open bedroom door, and something that felt dangerously close to happiness warming her chest. In Manhattan, a billionaire stood in his daughter's doorway watching her sleep, his phone in his hand, wondering how his carefully controlled life had gotten so beautifully complicated in the span of a week. In Manhattan, a little girl dreamed of cookies and tea parties, and a woman with yellow hair who didn't mind when she asked too many questions. And somewhere between Brooklyn and Central Park, in the space between loss and hope, 2 broken people were starting to believe they might be able to put each other back together. 1 dinner, 1 kiss, 1 promise at a time. 3 weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and carefully constructed routines. Victoria found herself at Alex's apartment twice a week, sometimes 3 times when her schedule allowed. Wednesday evenings after Sophie's therapy sessions. Saturday mornings for the promised cookie-making disasters. Sunday dinners that stretched late into the night while Sophie fought sleep and eventually lost. They hadn't defined what this was, hadn't put labels on the thing growing between them. Alex would kiss her goodbye at the door while Sophie wasn't looking, his hand lingering on her waist, and Victoria would take the subway home feeling like a teenager with a secret. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely unsustainable. Melissa cornered her at a coffee shop in late January, sliding into the booth across from Victoria with the determined look of someone who'd been patient long enough. "Okay, spill," Melissa said without preamble. "You've been dodging my calls for 3 weeks. You're smiling at your phone like a lunatic. And yesterday I called you at home and you weren't there, even though you said you had the day off." Victoria wrapped her hands around her mug. "I was out." "With him?" "Them." "With them." "Oh my God," Melissa leaned forward. "You're dating him. You're actually dating Alexander Reed. We're not dating, we're just..." "Just what? Spending all your free time together, meeting his kid? That's dating, Vic." "It's complicated. Everything about you is complicated." Melissa softened. "But seriously, are you okay? Because this is moving really fast." Victoria had been telling herself the same thing for weeks. Fast didn't even cover it. She'd gone from completely alone to spending every spare moment with a man and his daughter, inserting herself into their lives like she'd always been there. "I think I'm falling for him," Victoria admitted quietly. "You think?" "Okay, I know. I'm falling for him. For both of them." She looked up at Melissa. "Is that insane?" "Probably. But when has that ever stopped you?" Melissa reached across the table, squeezing Victoria's hand. "Just promise me you're being careful. Your heart's been through enough." "I know." "Does he know? About the infertility, about why your marriage really ended?" Victoria shook her head. "Not all of it. I told him I couldn't have kids. I didn't tell him how badly I wanted them. How every pregnancy announcement felt like someone was twisting a knife. How I still can't walk past the baby section at Target without wanting to cry. Vic, I know I should tell him. I will tell him. I just..." Her voice cracked. "What if it changes things? What if he realizes I'm getting too attached to Sophie and it scares him off? Or what if he's getting just as attached to you and he's scared too?" Victoria wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe the way Alex looked at her meant something real, something lasting, but she'd been wrong before. Her phone buzzed. Alex's name lit up the screen with a photo Sophie had taken, him making a ridiculous face while attempting to flip a pancake. "Alex. Emergency, Sophie's school called. She's fine, but I'm stuck in a meeting and can't leave for another hour. Any chance you're free?" Victoria's heart kicked up. "What happened?" Alex. "Threw up in class. Probably ate too much candy at Emma's house yesterday. School nurse says she needs to be picked up." Victoria. "I'm on my way." She was already standing, grabbing her coat. Melissa raised an eyebrow. "Emergency?" "Sophie's sick. I need to go." "You're picking her up from school?" "Alex can't leave work." "Vic, you're not her parent. You're not even... What are you exactly?" Victoria didn't have an answer. She just knew that Sophie needed someone, and Alex had called her, trusted her, and nothing else mattered. "I'll call you later," she said, already heading for the door. The school was on the Upper West Side, a private institution that probably cost more per year than Victoria made. She gave her name at the front desk, half expecting them to refuse, but apparently Alex had already called ahead because they directed her straight to the nurse's office. Sophie sat on a paper-covered examination table, looking small and miserable, clutching Mr. Buttons. Her face was pale, eyes red-rimmed. "Victoria!" She immediately reached for her. "I threw up in front of everyone. It was so embarrassing. Emma's going to tell everyone, and I'm never going to live it down." "Hey, it's okay." Victoria gathered her into a hug, smoothing her hair back. "Everyone throws up sometimes. I promise Emma will forget about it." "She won't. She remembers everything. Last year Marcus peed his pants and she still talks about it." The school nurse, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, handed Victoria some papers. "She should be fine. Probably just an upset stomach, but keep her home tomorrow and make sure she stays hydrated." "I will, thank you." Getting Sophie home required a cab ride where Sophie alternated between complaining about Emma and dozing against Victoria's shoulder. By the time they reached Alex's building, Sophie was fully asleep, Mr. Buttons dangling from one hand. The doorman, Robert, Victoria had learned his name, helped her get Sophie upstairs. Inside the apartment, Victoria carried her to bed, pulling off her shoes and tucking her in without waking her. She was in the kitchen making soup when her phone rang. Alex, finally free from his meeting. "How is she?" he asked immediately. "Asleep. The nurse said it's just an upset stomach." "I'm coming home." "You don't have to. I can stay until—" Tsk, Victoria. His voice was firm but warm. "I'm coming home. But thank you for picking her up, for taking care of her. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been available." "You would have figured it out. You always do." "Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to." He arrived 30 minutes later, still in his suit, hair disheveled from running his hands through it. Victoria met him at the door. "She's still sleeping," she said quietly. Alex dropped his briefcase, pulled Victoria into a hug. She felt him exhale against her hair, tension leaving his shoulders. "Thank you," he said again. "You don't have to keep thanking me." "Yes, I do." He pulled back to look at her. "You dropped everything. You picked up my kid from school, brought her home, made soup. You didn't have to do any of that." "I wanted to." "Why?" The question hung between them. Victoria thought about all the careful non-definitions, the refusal to label what this was, the way they'd been dancing around the truth for 3 weeks. "Because I care about her," Victoria said. "And because I care about you, and because when you called, there was nowhere else I wanted to be." Alex's expression shifted into something complicated, relief and fear and hope all tangled together. "We should talk." "Yeah, we should." They checked on Sophie first, still sleeping, curled around Mr. Buttons, then retreated to the living room. Alex poured them both wine. Neither of them drank, pacing in front of the windows while Victoria sat on the couch. "I'm doing this all wrong," he said finally. "Doing what wrong?" "This. Us." He stopped pacing, faced her. "I told myself we'd take it slow, that I wouldn't rush things or put pressure on you or let Sophie get too attached before we figured out what we were doing. But it's been 3 weeks and you're picking up my kid from school and making soup in my kitchen and I—" He stopped, struggling. "You what?" Victoria prompted. "I can't stop thinking about you, about us, about what this could be." He ran a hand through his hair. "And that terrifies me because I buried my wife 2 years ago and I swore I wouldn't do this again. Wouldn't let anyone in. Wouldn't risk Sophie getting hurt if it didn't work out." "Alex, but then you walked into our lives, or Sophie dragged you into our lives, and suddenly everything's different. Suddenly I'm coming home and you're here and Sophie's happy and the apartment doesn't feel so empty anymore." His voice cracked. "And I don't know what to do with that." Victoria stood, cross to him, took his hands. "Do you want me here?" "Yes." "Do you want this?" "Whatever this is." Yes, but..." "Then stop overthinking it." She squeezed his hands. "We're both scared. We're both carrying damage from people we lost. But we're also both here right now, trying to figure this out together. That has to count for something. What if I mess this up? Then we'll deal with it. Together." She touched his face. "I'm not Catherine. I'm not going to disappear. I'm not going to make you choose between your grief and moving forward, but I need you to be honest with me about what you want." Alex was quiet for a long moment, then, "I want you to stay. Not just today, not just when Sophie's sick. I want you to stay." "Like move in?" "Eventually, maybe, if you want that. But right now I just want to stop pretending this is casual. Stop acting like you're just someone who occasionally visits. You're more than that." He met her eyes. "At least I want you to be. Want you to." Victoria's heart was racing. This was too fast, too much, too everything. She'd known this man for 3 weeks. 3 weeks wasn't enough time to make life-changing decisions. But she'd also spent 3 weeks watching him be a father, watching him struggle with grief and exhaustion and still show up for his daughter every single day. 3 weeks watching Sophie bloom under attention, watching her smile grow wider every time Victoria walked through the door. 3 weeks feeling less alone than she had in 3 years. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Okay? Let's stop pretending. Let's see what this could be." Alex kissed her then, deep and desperate, his hands in her hair, her back pressed against the window. They broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads touching. Sophie's going to lose her mind, he said. In a good way? In the best way. She's been asking me for weeks when you're moving in. I'm not moving in. I know, but try telling her that. They ordered dinner, Thai food that arrived while Sophie was still sleeping, and ate on the couch, Victoria's legs across Alex's lap, talking about everything they'd been carefully avoiding. His work stress, her fear of getting hurt again, whether Sophie was really okay or just good at hiding when she wasn't. Her therapist says she's doing well, Alex said, stealing a spring roll from Victoria's container. Better than expected, considering, but she has nightmares sometimes. Wakes up crying about her mom. What do you do? Hold her. Tell her it's okay to be sad. Sometimes we look at pictures together, talk about Catherine. Other times we just sit there until she falls back asleep. He was quiet for a moment. The first year was hell. She was so little, didn't understand why Mommy wasn't coming home. I didn't know how to explain death to a 3-year-old. I can't imagine. I barely remember it, honestly. It's all a blur of crying and lawyers and trying to keep the company running while my world fell apart. He set down his food. My mother wanted me to sell everything, move somewhere quiet, focus on Sophie. But work was the only thing keeping me sane. If I stopped moving, I'd have to feel everything, and I wasn't ready for that. Are you ready now? I don't know. Some days yes, some days no. He looked at her. But having you here makes it easier. Makes everything easier. Sophie appeared in the doorway, hair wild from sleep, still clutching Mr. Buttons. You're still here, she said to Victoria, her voice small and hopeful. I'm still here. Are you staying for dinner? We already ate, but I can stay a little longer if you want. Sophie climbed onto the couch between them, burrowing into Victoria's side. My stomach still hurts. I know, baby. The soup should help when you're ready to eat. I don't want soup. I want crackers. Crackers it is. Victoria got up to get them, Alex following her into the kitchen. You're good at this, he said quietly. At what? Taking care of her. Being what she needs. I work with kids. It's kind of my job. It's more than that. He touched her face. You don't just tolerate her. You genuinely love spending time with her. Of course I do. She's amazing. She is. But not everyone sees that. Catherine's parents... He stopped, shook his head. They love her, but they see her as this fragile thing that needs to be protected. They don't see how strong she is, how brave. She's the bravest person I know. Yeah, she is. They returned to the living room where Sophie was building a nest out of couch cushions, arranging them just so. This is my sick nest, she announced. Only sick people are allowed in. Are we sick? Victoria asked. You can be temporarily sick, for solidarity. Sophie made room for both of them. Come on, we're watching movies. They ended up watching some animated film about a fish. Victoria lost track of the plot after the first 10 minutes, while Sophie fell asleep again, this time with her head on Victoria's lap and her feet on Alex's. We should move her to bed, Alex whispered. In a minute. They sat there in the flickering TV light, Victoria's hand stroking Sophie's hair while Alex watched them both with an expression she couldn't quite read. What? She asked softly. Nothing, just this. You here, Sophie happy, everything feeling almost normal. He paused. I didn't think I'd have this again. Have what? Family, the feeling of family. Victoria's throat tightened. Alex, I know it's early. I know we're still figuring this out, but I need you to know. He reached over Sophie, took Victoria's hand. I'm all in. Whatever this is, wherever it goes, I'm all in. So am I, Victoria whispered. They carried Sophie to bed together, Victoria pulling up the covers while Alex adjusted Mr. Buttons. At the door, Sophie's sleepy voice stopped them. Victoria? Yeah, sweetie? Are you my dad's girlfriend now? Victoria glanced at Alex, who looked like he'd stopped breathing. Would that be okay with you? Victoria asked carefully. Sophie considered this with her characteristic seriousness. Will you still come visit even when I'm not sick? Of course. And we can still make cookies? Definitely. And you won't leave like Mommy did? The question landed like a punch. Alex made a strangled sound, but Victoria crossed back to the bed, sat on the edge. Sweetie, your mommy didn't leave on purpose. She didn't want to go. I know. But she's still gone. Sophie's eyes were too old again, too knowing. And I don't want you to be gone too. Victoria felt tears burning. I'm not going anywhere, I promise. You can't promise that. Nobody can promise that. Dr. Sarah says life is unpredictable. You're right. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. Victoria took Sophie's small hand. But I can promise that I care about you and your dad very much. And I can promise that if you want me around, I'll be around. Deal? Sophie thought about it, then nodded. Deal. Now you're officially Dad's girlfriend and my friend. That's called multitasking. Despite everything, Victoria laughed. Where do you learn these words? Nana, she multitasks all the time. She says it's a survival skill. They tucked her in again, and this time she drifted off without further questions. In the hallway, Alex pulled Victoria into his arms. I'm sorry, he said. About what she said. About leaving. She shouldn't have. She's processing. It's healthy. It's heartbreaking. That too. They stood there for a moment, holding each other in the dim hallway while Sophie slept and the city hummed beyond the windows. I should go, Victoria said eventually. Early shift tomorrow. Stay. Alex, I know you have work, but stay anyway. Take the guest room. I'll make you coffee in the morning before you leave. He pulled back to look at her. Please, I don't want you taking the subway this late. Victoria knew she should say no, should maintain some boundary between her life and theirs. But the thought of going home to her empty apartment, of sleeping alone after this night, made her chest ache. Okay, she said, but I need to leave by 6. I'll set an alarm. The guest room was pristine, clearly unused, with a view of the park and sheets that probably cost more than Victoria's entire bed. She borrowed one of Alex's t-shirts, washed her face with fancy soap, and climbed between covers that felt like clouds. She was almost asleep when her phone buzzed. Alex. Thank you for today, for everything. Victoria. Stop thanking me. Alex. Never. Get some sleep. See you in the morning. Victoria. See you in the morning. She set her phone on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened. In one day, she'd gone from casual visitor to girlfriend, from occasional guest to someone who stayed over, from careful distance to all in. It was insane. It was terrifying. It was also the happiest she'd been in years. Across the hall, Alex lay awake in his own bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to remember the last time this apartment had felt this full. Catherine's photos still watched him from the nightstand, her smile frozen in time, forever 32, forever beautiful, forever gone. I'm trying, he whispered to her picture. I'm trying to move forward without forgetting you. I don't know if I'm doing this right. The photo didn't answer. It never did. But somewhere in this apartment, his daughter slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. And down the hall, a woman who'd appeared in their lives by accident had become essential without either of them noticing exactly when. Alex picked up his phone, pulled up a photo from earlier. Victoria and Sophie asleep on the couch. Sophie's hand tangled in Victoria's sweater, both of them peaceful. He saved it to his favorites, right next to photos of Catherine. Moving forward didn't mean forgetting. It just meant making room for new memories alongside the old ones. At 6 the next morning, Alex's alarm went off. He found Victoria already awake, dressed in yesterday's clothes, trying to smooth her hair into something presentable. Coffee, he offered. Please. They moved through the kitchen in comfortable silence, Alex starting the coffee maker while Victoria found mugs. It felt domestic in a way that should have been strange, but wasn't. Sophie's still sleeping, Alex said. I'll tell her you said goodbye. Tell her I'll call her later. Victoria accepted the coffee he handed her. And that we're still making cookies this weekend. She'll hold you to that. I'm counting on it. At the door, Alex kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. This is real now, he said. You and me. No more pretending. No more pretending, Victoria agreed. She made it to work with 10 minutes to spare, sliding into the locker room just as Jamie was heading out. You're wearing yesterday's clothes, Jamie observed. I had an emergency. An emergency that required you to sleep over? Victoria couldn't help smiling. Maybe. Oh my God, you stayed at his place. Sophie was sick. Alex couldn't leave work. I picked her up from school and you're already integrated into their family. Vic, you know this is crazy, right? Completely crazy. But you're doing it anyway? Victoria thought about Sophie's question last night, about being Alex's girlfriend and her friend, about multitasking. She thought about Alex's face when he'd said he was all in. Yeah, she said. I'm doing it anyway. Jamie shook her head, but she was smiling. Just be careful, okay? Your heart can't take another beating. I know. The day passed in the usual chaos of pediatric nursing, immunizations and ear infections, and one memorable incident involving a kid who'd stuck a Lego up his nose. But through it all, Victoria found herself checking her phone, smiling at texts from Alex and photos Sophie insisted he send her. Sophie eating crackers in her sick nest. Sophie showing Mr. Buttons her homework. Sophie holding a sign that said, "Thank you for taking care of me," with hearts drawn around the edges. At lunch, Melissa called. Okay, I've been patient enough. Tell me everything. So Victoria did. All of it. The school pickup, the conversation with Alex, Sophie's question about leaving, staying over in the guest room. Melissa listened without interrupting, which was how Victoria knew she was taking this seriously. So you're official now, Melissa said when Victoria finished. I guess we are. How does that feel? Terrifying, amazing, like I'm standing on the edge of something huge, and I can either jump or walk away, and both choices feel impossible. But you're jumping. I'm jumping. Good. You deserve this, Vic. You deserve to be happy. Even if it's complicated? Especially if it's complicated. Nothing worth having is ever simple. Melissa paused. But you need to tell him about the infertility, about how much it destroyed you when David left. He needs to know all of it. I know. When? Soon. I need to find the right time. There's never a right time for that conversation. There's just the necessary time. Victoria knew she was right. Knew she couldn't keep avoiding the full truth about why her marriage had ended, about the grief she still carried for children she'd never have. But telling Alex meant risking everything they'd just started building, and Victoria wasn't sure she was brave enough for that yet. Her shift ended at 7. She found 3 new texts from Alex waiting. Alex. Sophie's feeling better. She ate actual food. Alex. She wants to know if you can come over tomorrow. I told her you probably have plans, but she made me ask anyway. Alex. Okay, she's literally standing here glaring at me until I text you. Please respond before she stages a mutiny. Victoria smiled, typing back, Tell the mutineer I have a shift tomorrow, but I'm free Thursday. The response was immediate. She says Thursday is too far away and you should quit your job and move in immediately. Victoria. Tempting, but I like having health insurance. Alex. Fair point. Thursday it is. She's making a list of activities. I'm already exhausted. Victoria. You'll survive. Alex. Will I, though? Victoria. Yes. You're tougher than you think. Alex. I'm really not, but thanks for the vote of confidence. Victoria walked home through the January cold, her breath fogging in the air, thinking about Thursday and cookies, and the life that was slowly, impossibly becoming hers. On her refrigerator, Sophie's drawing still held the place of honor. 4 stick figures holding hands. Soon, Victoria thought. Soon she'd have to tell Alex everything, about the miscarriages she'd never mentioned, about the specialist appointments and the crushing diagnosis, about David walking out because she couldn't give him the family he wanted. Soon she'd have to risk losing this tentative happiness she'd found. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight she'd let herself believe that fairy tales were possible, that broken people could find each other and build something beautiful from their shared scars. Tonight was enough. Thursday never came. Wednesday night, Victoria's phone rang at 11:43. She was already in bed, half asleep, when Alex's name lit up the screen. Hello? Her voice was thick with sleep. I need to tell you something. Alex sounded strange, tight, controlled, like he was holding himself together by force of will. Victoria sat up, suddenly wide awake. What's wrong? Is Sophie okay? Sophie's fine. She's asleep. A pause. Catherine's parents are in town. They want to see her tomorrow. Okay, that's good, right? Sophie should see her grandparents. They want to take her, permanently. The words didn't make sense at first. Victoria's brain refused to process them. What? They've been talking to lawyers. They think... His voice cracked. They think I'm not capable of raising her alone. That she needs a mother figure, stability, a normal life. They want custody. They can't do that. They can try. Catherine's father has connections. money, lawyers who specialize in this stuff. Alex sounded exhausted. They've been building a case for months, apparently. Documented times I missed school events because of work, the nanny turnover, Sophie's therapy sessions. They're painting me as an absent father who's neglecting his daughter. Victoria's hands were shaking. But that's not true. You're an amazing father. Am I? I work 80 hours a week. I burn dinner. I forgot our ballet recital last month because I was in Chicago dealing with a construction crisis. He laughed, but it sounded broken. Maybe they're right. Maybe she'd be better off with them. Don't say that. Why not? They have a house in Connecticut, a stable marriage, all the time in the world. What do I have? A penthouse that's too big and too empty, a job that owns me, and a grief I can't seem to shake no matter how hard I try. You have Sophie, and she needs you. Does she? Or does she need what they can give her? A real family, 2 parents, normalcy? He was quiet for a moment. They're coming over tomorrow at 4. I wanted you to know before everything gets complicated. I'll be there. Victoria, you don't have to. I'll be there, she repeated firmly. 4 o'clock. I'm not letting you do this alone. After they hung up, Victoria lay in the dark, her mind racing. She'd known this happiness was temporary, that something would come along to shatter it. She just hadn't expected it to be this. She barely slept. By the time her alarm went off at 6, she'd already been awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out how to help. Work was impossible. She went through the motions, checking vitals, administering medications, comforting a kid who'd broken his arm falling off a swing, but her mind was elsewhere. At lunch, she called Melissa. They can't just take her, Melissa said immediately. Alex is her father. He has rights. Catherine's parents have money and lawyers, and apparently documentation of all his failures. He's not failing. He's grieving. There's a difference. Try telling that to a judge. Victoria pressed her fingers against her temples. What if they win, Mel? What if they actually take her away from him? Then you fight, both of you, together. Melissa paused. This is what you signed up for when you decided to be all in, remember? The complicated, messy, real stuff. I know, Victoria's voice broke. I just found them. I can't lose them already. Then don't. Show up, be there, fight for them. Victoria left work early, claiming a migraine that wasn't entirely a lie. She stopped at her apartment long enough to change into something more presentable, then headed to Manhattan. The doorman recognized her now, greeting her by name as he held the door. In the elevator, her reflection stared back at her, pale, worried, absolutely terrified. She knocked softly at 3:55. Alex answered immediately, like he'd been waiting by the door. He looked worse than she'd ever seen him. Rumpled suit, dark circles under his eyes, hair sticking up in every direction. You came, he said. Of course I came. He pulled her inside, holding her tight. Victoria felt him shaking. Where's Sophie? She asked. Her room. I told her Grandma and Grandpa were visiting. She doesn't know about the rest. Good. Let's keep it that way. They broke apart as the doorbell rang. Alex's expression went carefully blank, the mask of the successful businessman sliding into place. But Victoria saw his hands tremble as he reached for the door. Catherine's parents were exactly what Victoria expected. Elegant, wealthy, with the kind of bearing that came from generations of money and influence. Richard Ashford was tall and silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Victoria's car. Margaret Ashford was petite and perfectly put together, every blonde hair in place, pearls at her throat. They looked at Alex with something between pity and disdain. Then they noticed Victoria. I wasn't aware we'd have an audience, Richard said coolly. Victoria's not an audience. She's... Alex hesitated. I'm his girlfriend, Victoria said firmly, stepping forward. Victoria Hayes. Margaret's expression could have frozen fire. How convenient. Alexander suddenly has a girlfriend, right when we express concerns about Sophie's welfare. That's not... Alex started. Where's our granddaughter? Richard interrupted. Sophie appeared in the hallway before anyone could answer, Mr. Buttons under her arm. Grandma! Grandpa! She ran to them, and Margaret's expression softened as she embraced her. For a moment, Victoria saw past the lawyer-backed custody grab to grandparents who genuinely loved their granddaughter. This was going to be so much harder than she'd thought. They sat in the living room, Catherine's parents on one sofa, Alex and Victoria on the other, Sophie between her grandparents chattering about school and gymnastics and the cookies she was going to make with Victoria. "Who's Victoria?" Margaret asked, though her eyes said she already knew. "My friend. She's really nice. She picks me up from school sometimes when Dad's working." Sophie leaned against her grandmother. "She's teaching me to make chocolate chip cookies. The recipe only failed twice this time." "I see." Margaret's tone was ice. "And how long has this friendship been going on?" "Margaret," Alex warned. "It's a reasonable question, Alexander. Our granddaughter is spending time with a stranger, Shas." "She's not a stranger," Sophie said, frowning. "She's Victoria, and she's Dad's girlfriend. That means she's going to stick around." Richard and Margaret exchanged a look that made Victoria's stomach drop. "Sophie, sweetie," Margaret said gently, "why don't you go play in your room for a bit? The grown-ups need to talk." "But I want to stay with you." "I know, but this is adult conversation. We'll come get you in a little while." Sophie looked to Alex for confirmation. He nodded, his face carefully neutral. "Fine," Sophie sighed, "but you have to promise to stay for dinner. We're having pizza, the good kind." "We'll see, darling." Once Sophie was gone, the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. "So," Richard said, leaning back, "let's discuss why we're really here." "I know why you're here," Alex said. "Your lawyers already sent the paperwork." "Then you know we're serious. We love Sophie, Alexander, but she needs stability. She needs a proper home." "She has a home." "Does she? A penthouse in Manhattan, where she's raised by nannies because her father works 80-hour weeks?" Margaret's voice was sharp. "We've documented 17 instances in the past 6 months where you missed school events. 10 occasions where Sophie was picked up late from various activities. Her teacher says she often seems tired, that she talks about her father being sad. She's in therapy," Alex said tightly. "We're both dealing with grief. That doesn't make me a bad father." "No one's saying you're a bad father," Richard said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "We're saying she deserves better than being an afterthought in your busy life." "She's not an afterthought. Then why did you forget her ballet recital? Why was she the last child picked up from school 4 times last month? Why does her therapist's report say she's anxious about being abandoned?" Alex flinched like he'd been struck. Victoria couldn't stay quiet anymore. "Sophie's anxious because her mother died. Not because Alex is a bad father. He's doing his best in an impossible situation." Margaret turned her cold gaze on Victoria. "And what would you know about it, Miss Hayes? You've known my granddaughter for what? A few weeks?" 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Margaret's laugh was brittle. "And in that time you've inserted yourself into their lives, convinced a grieving widower that you're the solution to his problems, started playing house with a traumatized child." "That's enough," Alex said, his voice deadly quiet. "Is it? Because from where we're sitting, this looks like a man making reckless decisions in the wake of tragedy. Bringing strange women around our granddaughter, letting her get attached when this relationship will likely implode like all the others." "There haven't been others," Alex interrupted. "Victoria is the first person I've let into our lives since Catherine died. The only person." "Which makes it worse," Richard said. "You're rebounding, Alexander, using this woman as a replacement for Catherine." "Don't." Alex stood up, his control slipping. "Don't you dare talk about Catherine like that." "Someone needs to say it. Our daughter has been gone for 2 years, and you're already replacing her." "I'm not replacing her," Alex's voice cracked. "No one could replace her, but I'm also not going to spend the rest of my life alone because you think that's what she would have wanted." Margaret stood as well, her eyes bright with tears. "What Catherine would have wanted is for her daughter to be raised properly, with love and attention and stability. Can you honestly tell me Sophie has that with you?" The question hung in the air like poison. Alex opened his mouth, closed it. Victoria watched him struggle, watched him try to defend himself against accusations that clearly struck too close to home. "She has all of that," Victoria said quietly. "Maybe not perfectly, maybe not the way you'd do it, but Alex loves Sophie more than anything in this world. He's learning how to be a single parent while running a company and dealing with grief that would destroy most people. And yes, he makes mistakes, but he shows up. Every single day, he shows up for her." "And you think that's enough?" Margaret's voice shook. "Love isn't enough when a child is suffering. Sophie's not suffering, she's healing. There's a difference." "Is she?" "Because her therapist's notes say otherwise." Victoria felt like she'd been punched. You read her therapy notes? We're her grandparents. We have rights. You violated her privacy. We did what was necessary to protect her. Richard stood, straightening his suit. Alexander, we don't want to do this through the courts, but we will if we have to. Sophie deserves a stable home with two parents who can give her their full attention. I give her my full attention when you're not working, when you're not traveling, when you're not distracted by your new girlfriend. Richard picked up his briefcase. We're filing for custody next week. If you want to avoid a messy court battle, you'll consider what's really best for Sophie and let her come live with us in Connecticut. No. Alex's voice was flat. You're not taking my daughter. Then we'll see you in court. Richard headed for the door, Margaret following. We'll tell Sophie goodbye. They left Alex and Victoria standing in the living room, the silence deafening after they'd gone. They can't win, Victoria said. They can't actually take her from you. Can't they? Alex sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. I forgot her recital. I'm late picking her up. I work too much. I'm too sad. They're not wrong about any of it. Being imperfect doesn't make you unfit, doesn't it? Maybe she would be better off with them. A house with a yard, two parents, no nannies or missed events, or a father who can't cook anything that doesn't come in a box. Victoria sat beside him, taking his hand. Do you want to know what I see when I look at you and Sophie? He didn't answer. I see a man who reads his daughter bedtime stories even when he's exhausted, who learned to braid her hair from YouTube videos, who keeps her mother's memory alive instead of pretending she never existed, who's trying so hard to be everything she needs that he's forgotten to take care of himself. Victoria turned his face toward her. You're not perfect, but you're hers, and that matters more than a house in Connecticut. What if it doesn't? What if the court decides? Then we fight. We document everything you do right. We show them Sophie's happy, healthy, loved. We prove that families don't have to look perfect to be real. Alex studied her face. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Fighting for us. You could walk away right now, avoid the whole mess. This isn't your battle. Victoria thought about the question she'd been avoiding for weeks, the truth she'd been too afraid to speak out loud. Because I love you, she said, both of you. And I'm not walking away from that just because it's hard. Alex stared at her. You love me? Yeah, I do. I probably have since you invited me to dinner on Christmas Eve. I just didn't know how to say it. He kissed her then, desperate and grateful, his hands in her hair. I love you too, he whispered against her lips. I didn't think I could feel this again. Didn't think I was allowed to. But I do. I love you. They broke apart as Sophie's voice called from her room. Did they leave already? They didn't say goodbye. Alex closed his eyes. I'll tell her. We'll tell her, Victoria corrected. Together. Sophie was sitting on her bed looking betrayed when they entered. Grandma said they had to go because of traffic, but that's not true. I heard them arguing with you. You were listening? Alex asked. I was worried. You all sounded mad. Sophie hugged Mr. Buttons. Are they mad at me? No, baby. Never at you. Alex sat beside her. They're worried about you. They want to make sure you're okay. I am okay. I know, but sometimes grown-ups worry anyway. Sophie looked between them. They want me to live with them, don't they? The question knocked the air from Alex's lungs. How did you... I'm not stupid, Dad. I heard them say Connecticut and proper home and that you work too much. Her voice went small. Do you want me to go live with them? What? No, Sophie, no. Alex pulled her into his lap. You're staying with me. Always, I promise. But what if the court says I have to go? That's not going to happen. But what if it does? Sophie's eyes were filling with tears. What if they make me leave and I never see you again? What if I forget what you look like I'm forgetting Mommy? Hey, look at me. Alex tilted her chin up. That's not going to happen. You're my daughter. Nothing is going to change that. You can't know that. Yes, I can. Because I will fight anyone who tries to take you away from me. Courts, lawyers, even your grandparents who love you very much, but don't understand that you belong here. His voice was fierce. You're stuck with me, kid. Forever. Sophie threw her arms around his neck, sobbing. Victoria felt tears running down her own face as she watched them hold each other. I don't want a house in Connecticut, Sophie cried. I want to stay here with you and Victoria and Mr. Buttons. This is my home. I know, baby. I know. Victoria knelt beside them, adding her arms to the embrace. They stayed like that for a long time, the three of them tangled together while Sophie cried out her fear and Alex whispered promises he desperately hoped he could keep. Eventually, Sophie fell asleep, exhausted from crying. Alex carried her to bed while Victoria cleaned up the living room, picking up scattered toys and straightening cushions, trying to impose order on chaos. I need to tell you something, Victoria said when Alex returned. He looked so tired. If this is more bad news, I don't know if I can handle it tonight. It's not bad news. It's just truth. Something I should have told you weeks ago. She sat on the couch, patting the space beside her. Come here. He sat, taking her hand. Victoria took a breath. I told you my marriage ended because I couldn't have kids, but I didn't tell you the whole story. She told him then. All of it. The years of trying, the specialists, the diagnosis, the miscarriages she'd never mentioned, two tiny hopes that had ended before they'd really begun. The way David had looked at her after the second one, like she'd failed some fundamental test of womanhood. He said I was broken, Victoria said, her voice shaking. That he couldn't spend his life with someone who couldn't give him a family. He left 3 months later, filed papers, took the apartment, moved in with someone else within 6 months. Jesus, Victoria, She got pregnant immediately. Of course she did. They have 2 kids now, a boy and a girl. Perfect family. Victoria wiped at her eyes. I spent a year in therapy trying to accept that I'd never be a mother, that my body had betrayed me, that I was fundamentally incomplete. You're not incomplete, aren't I? I can't give you children, Alex. If we stay together, if this becomes something permanent, you need to know that. Sophie will be your only child. There won't be siblings or babies or any of the things people expect from a relationship. Alex was quiet for a long moment. Then, can I tell you something? Always. After Catherine died, I thought my life was over. Not in a dramatic way, I wasn't suicidal or anything. I just thought the good parts were finished, that I'd spend the rest of my life going through the motions, being Sophie's dad, running the company, existing, but not really living. He turned to face her fully. And then you walked into my life. Or Sophie dragged you into my life. And suddenly I was laughing again, looking forward to things, feeling like maybe there was more ahead than just surviving. He cupped her face. I don't need more children, Victoria. I need you. Sophie needs you. We're already a family. If you want to be part of it, if you can handle our mess and our grief and my impossible work schedule and Sophie's complete lack of filter, that's all I want. Even knowing I can't, I don't care. I swear, I don't care. He kissed her forehead. You're enough. More than enough. Victoria started crying again, huge, ugly sobs that she'd been holding back for years. Alex held her through it, his own tears falling into her hair. I'm scared, she admitted when she could speak. Scared of losing you both. Scared of getting attached to Sophie and having someone take her away. Scared of being happy, because every time I've been happy before, something's destroyed it. I'm scared too, Alex said. Terrified, actually. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe and alone. They sat there holding each other until Victoria's tears dried and exhaustion settled into her bones. What do we do now? She asked. Now we get a lawyer, document everything, build a case showing Sophie's thriving here, that she has stability, love, a support system. He looked at her. If you're willing to be part of that, to testify if it comes to it, to put yourself through this mess. Of course I'm willing. It's going to get ugly. They'll dig into your past, your divorce, everything. They'll try to paint you as some opportunist taking advantage. I don't care. Let them dig. Let them try. Victoria straightened her shoulders. I'm not losing this family. The next 3 weeks were hell. Alex hired lawyers, expensive ones, who specialized in family custody cases. They interviewed Sophie's teachers, her therapist, Alex's employees. They documented his involvement in her life, the careful balance he'd struck between work and fatherhood. They also interviewed Victoria. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen, asked every question Victoria had dreaded, about her relationship with Alex, about her infertility, about why her marriage had failed. They're going to argue you're using Sophie to fulfill your own maternal needs, Patricia said bluntly. That you're not actually in love with Alexander. You're in love with the idea of being a mother. That's not true. I believe you, but you need to be prepared for them to say it anyway. Patricia made notes on her tablet. Tell me about a typical week. How often do you see Sophie? 3, maybe 4 times? Wednesday after her therapy usually? Saturday mornings? Sometimes Sunday dinners? Do you stay over? Sometimes. In the guest room. Have you discussed marriage? Moving in officially? Victoria hesitated. Not yet. We're taking it slow. Not that slow if you're picking her up from school and staying over. Patricia's expression softened slightly. I'm not judging. I'm preparing you for what the other side will say. They'll argue this relationship is moving too fast, that you're inserting yourself into Sophie's life before you and Alexander have established a real foundation. What we have is real. I know, but a 6-week relationship looks rushed when you're fighting for custody of a child. Victoria left the meeting feeling sick. She met Alex at a coffee shop near his office, sliding into the booth across from him. How bad? He asked. Pretty bad. They're going to tear us apart. Let them try. He reached across the table, taking her hand. I talked to Sophie's therapist today. Dr. Sarah's willing to testify that Sophie's doing well, that she talks about you constantly in sessions, that our relationship has actually helped her healing process. Really? Really? Apparently Sophie told her you're like a mom but different, and that she feels less lonely since you've been around. Alex smiled slightly. Dr. Sarah says that's significant progress for a kid who's been struggling with attachment. Victoria felt tears threatening again. She seemed to cry constantly these days. I can't believe this is happening, she said. 6 weeks ago, I was alone in a restaurant on Christmas Eve thinking my life was over. Now I'm fighting for a family I didn't even know I wanted. Do you want it? Really? Alex's expression was vulnerable. Because if this is too much, if you need to step back, I'm not stepping back. I'm all in. Remember? Even if we lose? We're not going to lose. But Victoria didn't know if she believed that. The court date was set for mid-February. In the weeks leading up to it, Victoria moved through her days in a fog of anxiety. She still went to work, still saw patients, still smiled and joked with Jamie, but underneath, she was terrified. She spent every free moment at Alex's apartment. They needed to show stability, consistency, that they were building something real. Sophie seemed oblivious to the tension, chattering about school and gymnastics and the Valentine's Day party she was planning. I'm making cards for everyone, she announced one evening while they made dinner together, pasta that only burned a little this time. Emma says homemade cards are babyish, but I think they're nicer than store ones. I agree, Victoria said. Homemade is always better. Will you help me? I'm not very good at cutting straight lines. Of course. They spent the evening at the dining table, construction paper and glitter everywhere, making valentines. Sophie insisted on making extras, one for her teacher, one for Dr. Sarah, one for the doorman. And this one's for you, she said, handing Victoria a card covered in hearts and stickers. Because you're my Valentine too. Victoria opened it. Inside, in Sophie's careful printing, I love you. Thank you for not leaving. The misspelling made it somehow more precious. I love you too, sweetie, Victoria whispered, pulling her into a hug. Later, after Sophie was asleep, Alex found Victoria on the balcony despite the February cold. You okay? He asked, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. She made me a Valentine. I saw. She's been working on it for days. What if we lose, Alex? What if they take her away and she thinks I left on purpose? That I broke my promise? That's not going to happen. You don't know that. Yes, I do. He turned her to face him. Because I've seen the evidence Patricia's compiled. Sophie's grades have improved since you've been in her life. Her teacher says she's more engaged, happier. Dr. Sarah's testimony is glowing. Even the doorman is willing to testify about how you're here constantly, how Sophie lights up when she sees you. The doorman. Robert apparently takes his job very seriously. He keeps detailed notes about everyone who enters the building. Alex smiled. He wrote a whole paragraph about how you always ask about his grandson and remember his wife's name. Despite everything, Victoria laughed. I didn't know he was taking notes. Everyone's taking notes now. That's what happens in custody battles. He pulled her close. But the notes are good, Victoria. They show a family that's working. Maybe not perfect, maybe a little unconventional, but working. The court date arrived too quickly. Victoria took the day off work, meeting Alex and his lawyers at the courthouse downtown. She dressed carefully, conservative but not severe, professional but approachable. Alex wore a suit that made him look like the successful businessman he was, but his tie was slightly crooked and his hair needed cutting. He looked human, imperfect, real. Catherine's parents arrived with their legal team, 3 lawyers in identical suits carrying briefcases that probably cost more than Victoria made in a month. Margaret looked at Victoria with barely concealed contempt. Richard didn't look at her at all. The hearing was closed, just the judge, the lawyers, and the families. Sophie was being interviewed separately by a court-appointed child psychologist, something that had made Alex physically ill when he'd found out. "She's 6, he'd said. "She shouldn't have to choose." But now they sat in a sterile conference room while lawyers argued about fitness and stability and what was best for the child. The Ashfords' lawyer, a man named Whitmore, who reminded Victoria of a shark in an expensive suit, laid out their case methodically. Alex's work schedule, the missed events, the nanny turnover, Sophie's therapy notes mentioning abandonment fears. "And then there's the matter of Miss Hayes," Whitmore said, turning to Victoria. "A woman Mr. Reed has known for barely 2 months, already integrated into his daughter's life, staying overnight, picking her up from school, playing house with a traumatized child." "Objection," Patricia said. "Characterizing a healthy relationship as playing house." "Is it healthy?" Whitmore interrupted. "Miss Hayes, isn't it true that your previous marriage ended due to your infertility?" Victoria's stomach dropped. "Yes. And isn't it true that your ex-husband left you because you couldn't provide him with children?" It's more complicated than that." "Is it?" "From the divorce filing, it seems quite clear. He wanted a family. You couldn't give him one. He left." Whitmore smiled coldly. "Now you're in a relationship with a widower who has a 6-year-old daughter. Convenient, wouldn't you say?" "It's not like that, isn't it? You get the child you couldn't have. Mr. Reed gets a mother figure for Sophie. Everyone wins. Except Sophie, who gets attached to someone who's using her to fulfill unmet maternal needs." "That's not true." Victoria's voice shook but held firm. "I love Sophie, and I love Alex. Not because they're filling some void, but because they're good people who let me into their lives when I was alone and broken." "Broken," Whitmore repeated. "Interesting word choice. So you admit you're damaged goods?" "Objection!" Patricia was on her feet. "This is harassment." "I'll allow it," the judge said quietly. "But get to your point, counselor." Whitmore turned back to Victoria. "Miss Hayes, have you and Mr. Reed discussed marriage?" "Not formally." "Not formally, so casually then?" "We've talked about the future, yes." "A future that includes you raising his daughter, taking on a maternal role despite your inability to have children of your own?" Victoria wanted to scream. Instead, she met his eyes and said, "Yes. If Alex and Sophie want me in their lives, that's the future I want." "Even though you've known them for 8 weeks?" "Even though." "That's either very brave or very reckless." "Maybe it's both." Whitmore smiled like she'd given him exactly what he wanted. No further questions. The Ashfords presented their case next. Photographs of their Connecticut home with its yard and white picket fence, testimony from Sophie's former nanny about Alex's long work hours, Margaret's tearful statement about wanting to honor her daughter's memory by raising Sophie in a stable, loving home. It was devastating. Then Patricia stood up. "Your Honor, the Ashfords paint a picture of neglect and instability. But let's look at the actual evidence." Sophie's current teacher submitted a letter stating that Sophie's academic and social performance has markedly improved over the past 2 months. Her therapist, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, has provided testimony that Sophie is thriving emotionally and has formed a healthy attachment to Miss Hayes that has actually aided her healing process. Patricia pulled up documents on her tablet. "Mr. Reed's work schedule has been demanding, yes, but in the past 6 weeks he hasn't missed a single school event. He's delegated more at work, hired a more stable childcare situation, and actively worked to create a better work-life balance. This isn't a man who's neglecting his child. This is a man who's learning how to be a single parent while running a company." She turned to the Ashfords. "The Ashfords love Sophie. No one disputes that, but love isn't enough to justify taking a child from her father. Sophie has told the court psychologist, in her own words, that she wants to stay with her father, that she feels safe and happy in their home. that she loves Victoria and wants her to be part of their family. Patricia's voice strengthened. This isn't about what's perfect. It's about what's real. And the reality is that Sophie has a father who adores her, a home where she's thriving, and a support system that includes a woman who loves her despite having known her for only 2 months. That's not instability. That's a family finding their way forward after tragedy. The judge was silent for a long moment. "I'd like to hear from Mr. Reed," she said finally. Alex stood, his hands shaking slightly. Victoria had never seen him look so vulnerable. "Your Honor," he began, "I'm not a perfect father. I work too much. I burned dinner. I forgot my daughter's ballet recital because I was dealing with a work crisis. Those are all true." He paused. "But I'm also the person who sits with Sophie when she has nightmares about her mother, who learned to braid her hair from YouTube because she wanted to look like the other girls at school, who reads her the same bedtime story every night because it makes her feel safe." His voice cracked. "I'm not what the Ashfords think a father should be, but I'm what Sophie needs. I'm hers." "And Miss Hayes?" the judge asked. "Where does she fit into this?" Alex looked at Victoria. "She's the person who made us a family again, not a replacement for Catherine. No one could replace her, but someone who loves Sophie for who she is, who isn't scared off by our grief, who shows up even when it's hard." He turned back to the judge. "If you take Sophie from me, you're not giving her a better life. You're teaching her that families fall apart, that loss is permanent, that broken people can't heal. I don't want that for my daughter." The judge made notes, her expression unreadable. "I'll have my decision in 1 week," she said. Court adjourned. The waiting was agony. Victoria moved into Alex's apartment, unable to bear being separated from them while their future hung in the balance. She and Alex barely slept, lying awake at night holding each other while Sophie slept peacefully down the hall, oblivious to how close they were to losing everything. "What if she rules against us?" Victoria whispered one night. "Then we appeal. We fight. We don't give up." "But what if—" "No, what ifs?" Alex pulled her closer. "We did everything we could. Now we wait." Sophie seemed to sense something was wrong despite their efforts to act normal. She was clingier than usual, asking Victoria multiple times a day if she was leaving. "I'm not going anywhere," Victoria promised each time. "You can't know that," Sophie said, her too-old wisdom showing. "Nobody can know anything for sure." The call came on a Friday afternoon. Patricia's voice was calm, but Victoria could hear something underneath. The judge ruled. Alex's hand tightened on the phone. Victoria pressed close, trying to hear. "And?" Alex's voice was barely audible. "You won. Full custody remains with you. The Ashfords can have scheduled visitation, but Sophie stays with you." The sound Alex made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. He dropped the phone, pulling Victoria into his arms. "We won," he said. "Oh my God, we won." They told Sophie that evening over pizza, the good kind, as she'd requested weeks ago. "So I'm staying here?" Sophie asked, looking between them. "You're staying here," Alex confirmed. "Forever?" "Forever." Sophie was quiet for a moment, then, "Can Victoria stay too?" "Forever?" Alex looked at Victoria, hope and question in his eyes. Victoria thought about everything that had brought her here. The humiliating rejection on Christmas Eve, the little girl with the teddy bear, the broken man learning to live again. She thought about damaged baggage and second chances and families that didn't look perfect but were real anyway. "Yeah," she said, her voice thick with tears. "I can stay forever." Sophie cheered, throwing her arms around both of them. They sat there in the middle of the dining room, the three of them tangled together with pizza getting cold and Mr. Buttons watching from his chair. Later, after Sophie was asleep, Alex found Victoria on the balcony, looking out at the city. "I talked to Patricia today," he said, "about next steps." "Next steps." "Making this official, you and me." He pulled a small box from his pocket. Victoria's heart stopped. "This was Catherine's," he said, opening it to reveal a simple diamond ring. "Her mother gave it back to me after the funeral. I haven't looked at it in 2 years. Alex, I don't want to replace her. I couldn't if I tried. But I also don't want to spend the rest of my life alone because I'm afraid of moving forward." He took Victoria's hand. "I love you. Sophie loves you. We want you to be part of this family. Officially." "Is this a proposal?" "Worst proposal ever, right?" No planning, no romantic restaurant, just a guy on a balcony with his dead wife's ring asking a woman he's known for 8 weeks to marry him. He laughed nervously. But yeah, I'm asking. Will you marry me? Victoria looked at the ring, at Alex's hopeful face, at the life they'd accidentally built together. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry me. They got married 3 months later in a small ceremony at City Hall with Sophie as their only witness. Nothing fancy, nothing perfect, just two broken people promising to put each other back together one day at a time. Sophie insisted on being the flower girl despite there being no aisle and no flowers. Every wedding needs a flower girl, she said seriously. That's a rule. So they bought her a basket of rose petals and let her scatter them across the floor of the courthouse while other couples waited their turn. Catherine's parents didn't come. But they sent a card, brief, formal, wishing them well. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. Margaret called a week later. We'd like to see Sophie, she said, if that's still possible. Of course, Alex said. She's your granddaughter. She should know you. They worked out a schedule, 1 weekend a month in Connecticut, holidays split evenly. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Victoria moved in officially in April, her small studio apartment in Brooklyn given up for the massive penthouse on Central Park West. It should have felt overwhelming, but it just felt right. She kept her job at Mount Sinai. Alex cut back his hours at work. Together they figured out the logistics of parenting, school pickups and homework help, and the never-ending laundry that came with a 6-year-old. Sophie called her Victoria for 3 more months. Then one night at dinner she said, "Can I call you Mom? Not like my real mom, but like a second mom?" Victoria had to leave the table, overwhelmed by tears. When she came back, Sophie was worried she'd upset her. "You didn't upset me," Victoria said, kneeling beside her chair. "You made me happier than I've been in my entire life. So I can call you Mom?" "You can call me whatever feels right." Sophie thought about it. "How about Mama V? That way you're different from my other mom, but you're still a mom." Mama V is perfect. On their first anniversary, Victoria found out she was pregnant. It should have been impossible. The doctors had been clear. Her chances were less than 1%. Multiple miscarriages meant it was unlikely she'd ever carry to term. But somehow, impossibly, she was pregnant. She told Alex on Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after the night they'd met. They were at Cielo again, same restaurant, same table by the window, this time with Sophie between them teaching Mr. Buttons proper table manners. "I have a present for you," Victoria said, sliding an envelope across the table. Alex opened it, pulled out the ultrasound photo. He stared at it for a long moment, not understanding. Then his eyes went wide. Are you? "I'm pregnant, 12 weeks. The doctors don't know how it happened, but it did." Sophie grabbed the photo. "Is this a baby? Are we getting a baby?" "Maybe," Victoria said carefully. "It's still early. Things could go wrong." "But they might not," Alex said, his voice full of wonder. "They might not go wrong." They didn't. Victoria gave birth to a healthy baby boy the following August. They named him Henry Alexander Reed, and Sophie declared herself the best big sister in the history of sisters. "I've been practicing with Mr. Buttons," she said seriously, holding her baby brother for the first time. "I know exactly what to do." Alex's mother visited from Florida, tearfully holding her new grandson, while Sophie provided running commentary on all the ways babies were weird. Even Catherine's parents came, Margaret's eyes filling with tears as she looked at the baby. "He has her eyes," she whispered. "Catherine's eyes." "Yeah," Alex said softly. "He does." It wasn't perfect. Henry was colicky and never slept. Sophie went through a phase of jealousy where she accidentally kicked the baby's carrier. Victoria struggled with postpartum anxiety, convinced something terrible was going to happen, but they got through it together. Because that's what families did. Broken, imperfect, cobbled-together families that started with a lonely woman in a restaurant and a little girl with a teddy bear. They showed up for each other. They forgave the burned dinners and forgotten recitals and moments of weakness. They built something real from shared scars and second chances. On Henry's first birthday, Victoria found Sophie in the library, Catherine's library, looking at photo albums. "What are you doing, sweetheart?" "Looking at pictures of my first mom," Sophie said. "So I remember." Victoria sat beside her. "Tell me about her." Sophie pointed to a photo of Catherine dancing, mid-leap, her face joyful. Dad says she was beautiful, that she loved to dance and read books and make up songs, that she would have loved me so much if she'd lived longer. I'm sure she did love you so very much. Do you think she's mad that you're here instead of her? Victoria had wondered the same thing countless times. She looked at Catherine's photo, young, vibrant, full of life, and tried to find words for a question with no easy answer. I think she'd want you and your dad to be happy, Victoria said finally. And if having me around makes you happy, then maybe she's okay with it. Sophie leaned against her. I'm happy, really happy, even when Henry cries all night and I'm tired. Me too, baby. Me too. Years passed. Sophie grew up, lost teeth, learned to ride a bike, started middle school with all the drama that entailed. Henry became a toddler, then a little boy, obsessed with trucks and dinosaurs, and his big sister, who he followed everywhere. Alex's hair went gray at the temples. Victoria found her first gray hair, and Sophie very helpfully pointed out 7 more. They bought a house in Westchester with a yard, keeping the penthouse for nights when Alex had to work late. They fought sometimes, about money, about parenting styles, about whose turn it was to deal with the school fundraiser, but they also laughed, made love, built a life that was messy and complicated and entirely theirs. On their 5th anniversary, they went back to Cielo one more time. Do you ever think about that night? Alex asked, holding her hand across the table. All the time, Victoria said. How close I came to going home alone. How different everything would be if Sophie hadn't decided I needed rescuing. She still thinks she rescued you. She did. You both did. Victoria smiled. I was so broken that night, so convinced I'd never have the family I wanted. And then you proved me wrong. We proved each other wrong, Alex corrected. I thought I was done, that the best parts of my life were over, but I was wrong. They were just beginning. They raised their glasses to second chances, to families that didn't look perfect, to little girls with teddy bears who saw people for who they really were, to love that appeared when everything else felt lost, because sometimes the worst night of your life was just the beginning of the best parts. Sometimes damaged baggage found other damaged baggage, and together they built something beautiful. Sometimes broken people didn't need to be fixed. They just needed to be seen. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, fairy tales were possible. Not the perfect kind from storybooks, but the real kind. The kind built from loss and grief and the courage to try again. The kind that started in a restaurant on Christmas Eve, with snow falling outside and a little girl who believed in rescue. The kind that lasted.